Chapter 1052. Congratulations, fated ones, on successfully passing the trial of the white ball of light. I hope you can take the treasures with you to revitalize your tribes. The statue of Shihazi sat on the ground with a smile on its face. That's right, the statue had developed facial expressions. And Lin was astonished. Did the statue finally become a spirit? Statue Shihazi. Lan Xiaoni's mouth also gaped open in shock. Are you really Senior Shihazi? Shihazi looked up with a handsome yet slightly stiff smile. That's me. There was only one ball of light left, so the divine intent I left here has been awakened. You've made it to this stage, so you have the right to trigger this remnant divine intent. Lin's eyes lit up. Was he going to tell them a story or give them some benefits? Lan Xiaoni's heart was also surging with emotions. She couldn't compete with Lin in the fight for treasures, but if her ancestor was going to give out some benefits, she should get one, right? In that case, she wouldn't have to go back and embarrass herself too much. A disappointed expression suddenly appeared on the statue of Shihazi. Sigh. I really didn't think that you would choose to take my treasures instead of the secrets of the two tribes. Are all juniors so snobbish these days? Lan Xiaoni was extremely aggrieved. She wanted to choose the secrets of the two tribes. However, Lin was simply too terrifying. What could she do if Lin wanted to choose the treasures? She looked at Shihazi and was just about to tell him everything, but she swallowed the words that were about to come out of her mouth when she glanced at Lin. Lin couldn't help but retort, "You have the gall to say that? If you really want to give benefits to your juniors, then don't go through all these twists and turns. Why don't you just give us the treasures and the secrets of the two tribes? Why do you have to choose one of the two?" The statue of Shihazi choked upon hearing this. He opened his mouth, but he didn't know what to say. He fell silent, as if he really was thinking about why he did this in the first place. Lan Xiaoni. A thought seemed to have occurred to Shihazi, and his eyes lit up. That's because my Tao partner and I wanted to test the fate between us. Now that fate is here, the secrets of the two races shall be buried at the bottom of the sea forever. This is the choice of fate. The corner of Lin's mouth twitched. It was as if he hadn't said anything at all. Lan Xiaoni was astonished. Is this what it means to leave it to fate? Wouldn't that be too irresponsible to the two races? Lin silently gave a thumbs up. Well said. However, he actually dared to say this in front of the old ancestor. He was really stubborn. Sure enough, Shihazi's statue's face darkened. It was literally black. Its pristine white head suddenly turned black, as if it were a little angry. Lan Xiaoni realized that she had misspoken, and her face paled with fright. She was just about to open her mouth to salvage the situation when Shihazi spoke again. However, his voice was extremely cold and devoid of any emotion. Who would have thought that a human would be able to sneak in here? Shihazi looked at Lin. Lin puffed out his chest. What's wrong with humans? Are you looking down on humans? A smile appeared on Shihazi's face, and he opened his palm. Black Ball World, activate. Rumble. An extremely powerful spatial power instantly enshrouded Lin and Lan Xiaoni. Lin was struck by a wave of nausea and dizziness before arriving in an extremely vast cave. The cave was riddled with jagged rocks of all shapes and sizes, and there were also many peculiar carvings standing silently around the edges of the cave. What the hell is this? Teleporting us to the light ball world, just like that? I still haven't decided whether I want to continue participating in the trial. Lin grumbled as he patted his dizzy head. Big Boss Lin, it's a waste not to take anything from this place. With your power, no enemies can do anything to you anyway. Lan Xiaoni encouraged. Lin looked at the mermaid princess, who was becoming more and more like an underling, and a gratified smile appeared on his face. After this trial is over, I'll reward you handsomely. Alright. A vibrant smile appeared on Lan Xiaoni's face. She had already lost all hope in the trial anyway, so she might as well follow Enlin and take some of Enlin's specialties home. That way, she would have more confidence in explaining things to her seniors. It could only be said that Enlin was too bad *SS. She had already worked hard for 6 worlds, but her efforts were still futile. She couldn't be blamed for this. Enlin turned his attention to the final trial. The cave was extremely vast, and the very edge of the cave was an inky black rock wall. This was most likely an underground world. There was also a scorching river of flames slowly flowing through the cave, illuminating the entire dark space with its light. There was a strange sacrificial altar on the other side of the river of flames. It was enshrouded in flames and poisonous miasma, creating a perilous realm over a kilometer in radius. At the center of the sacrificial altar, there was a blue stone that was glowing with a faint light. Lan Xiaoni was elated. Big Boss Enlin, could that stone be the treasure of this trial? Enlin stroked his chin as he looked at the surging river of flames, the terrifyingly hot flames, and the layers of poisonous miasma that were capable of corroding all things. Could it be that this trial isn't about defeating monsters? Instead, it's about progressing from the starting point to the finishing point? Progressing? Lan Xiaoni's features paled slightly as she spoke in a trembling voice. Then, those obstacles must be very terrifying, right? The ancient heavenly fiend celestial in the white ball trial was already extremely terrifying. If the difficulty of the black ball trial was changed to flames and poisonous miasma, then wouldn't that mean that those flames and poisonous miasma were extremely terrifying? Stay here and don't move. I'll go on my own, Enlin instructed. Lan Xiaoni nodded obediently as she looked at Enlin's reliable figure. All right, I'll wait for you. Enlin's body flashed, and he began to cross over the winding river of flames. Boom, boom, boom. All of a sudden, the river of flames surged violently, and a series of terrifying flaming dragons rose into the sky before pouncing toward Enlin at an astonishing speed. Enlin heaved a sigh of relief upon seeing this. It was always good to see some movement. What if this world remained completely still? That would be quite troublesome. Break. He pressed a hand down. Vital energy surged violently, forming a gigantic vital energy palm with a radius of over a kilometer, which crushed down toward the flaming dragons. Enlin's simple attack was comparable to a full-force attack from a cultivator at the soul formation pinnacle stage. Rumble, the gigantic vital energy palm was imbued with unimaginable power, and it pulverized several gigantic flaming dragons. Enlin also borrowed the momentum to descend to the ground and successfully cross over the river of flames. After crossing over the river of flames returned to its original calm state, as if nothing had happened. A faint smile appeared on Enlin's face. These obstacles might be troublesome for normal soul formation stage prodigies, but they were extremely easy for a soul formation stage cultivator like him. He began to walk toward the sacrificial altar. The sacrificial altar was enshrouded in terrifying crimson flames, and the scorching power warped the air and incinerated everything in its path. This was an extremely pure and fearsome flame power. Enlin walked up the sacrificial altar, and the 4 divine flames transformed into indestructible armor. He was like the master of all flames, and wherever he went, all flames would bow before him. His path was unimpeded. The flames were extremely powerful, and they were powerful enough to melt all soul formation stage cultivators into puddles of blood. However, Enlin was even more powerful, and his power had long surpassed that of a soul formation stage cultivator. The poisonous miasma within the sacrificial altar was still the same. Even though it was extremely terrifying, it was only effective against soul formation stage living beings, and not against Enlin. Isn't this a little too easy? Enlin passed through the poisonous miasma and walked toward the center of the sacrificial altar, arriving in front of the blue rectangular stone. The stone was very tall, about 12 meters, and it exuded an extremely powerful energy fluctuation. It was this energy fluctuation that made Enlin feel that it was the treasure of this trip. So, is it you? Enlin reached out and touched the cold stone. Suddenly, a sense of danger that made his hair stand on end came from behind him. Enlin immediately turned around and his pupils contracted. Before he could even react, a blue shadow that was invisible to the naked eye had already pierced through his chest. The sharp light was imbued with a vast divine might, and it instantly tore open the divine body that he was so proud of, pierced through his heart, and pinned him firmly onto the blue stone. Chapter 1053. Pwah! Enlin's heart was punctured, and he threw up a mouthful of blood. This was the power of the divine Tao, and it was an extremely powerful one at that. A blue spear pierced through Enlin's body and even the blue rock behind him. Black symbols appeared on the spear, from which an extremely fearsome restrictive power erupted and rendered Enlin completely powerless. His heart was punctured, and blood flowed down the spear to the ground. His vitality was quickly fading away. Enlin's first reaction was to turn to Lan Xiaoni, only to discover that Lan Xiaoni was also looking at him with an astonished expression. It wasn't her. Then who was it? Even with Enlin's powerful divine sense, he was still unable to detect where the enemy was. Right at this moment, the rhombus-shaped black crystal in front of his chest suddenly erupted with an extremely powerful life force energy, which flowed into his body to resist the spear's power of the divine Tao and prevent it from destroying his body any further. Was he saved? No, he wasn't. Enlin could sense that his body was becoming more and more feeble, and his blood was flowing away relentlessly. Gu Yu's black crystal was only delaying his death. If things continued like this, he would still be screwed. A burst of power suddenly converged on his finger, and his storage ring slowly fell off. No! Enlin let loose a heart-wrenching cry. His cries of grief and indignation were even more anguished than when his heart had been punctured. The storage ring contained hundreds of millions of his family's wealth. That was his lifeblood. However, the storage ring really did fly away. It flew out of the sacrificial altar, past the sea of flames, past the scorching river of flames, and arrived on the other side of the river. Crack! A spatial rift suddenly appeared. This was a white spatial passageway that exuded a gentle light. Enlin's storage ring hovered in front of the spatial rift. Big Boss Enlin, are you alright? Lan Xiaoni let loose a cry of surprise. Enlin, do I look like I'm alright? Enlin spoke with difficulty. I'm not alright. I feel like I'm about to die. Lan Xiaoni, I'm here to save you. Right at this moment, a voice suddenly sounded. Junior of the Spirit Fish Clan, take this human storage ring and leave through that spatial passageway, and you'll be able to complete the trial of the Black Ball world. All of my treasures are in my storage ring. You can use the treasures in my storage ring to revitalize the Spirit Fish Clan. This is your mission, and you can fulfill it now. Shi Haizi's voice reverberated through the air. Enlin and Lan Xiaoni both faltered upon hearing this. Lan Xiaoni turned to look at the storage ring beside the crack. I'll take Big Boss Enlin's storage ring, and then I can leave, that's true. That way I'll be able to complete the mission that the Spirit Fish Clan has given me, and all of the treasures will be mine. Lan Xiaoni's breathing became heavier and heavier, and a scorching light appeared in her eyes. Enlin, on the other hand, felt a chill in his heart and he felt unwell. This was a fantastic opportunity for Lan Xiaoni. This was a complete victory. Everything became clear. No wonder Gu Yu had said that Lan Xiaoni was his greatest enemy. No wonder the high priest of the Spirit Fish Clan, Yu Feiyu, trusted Lan Xiaoni so much. It turned out that Lan Xiaoni didn't need to be extraordinarily powerful. Just her bloodline alone was enough to crush all external forces. With a Spirit Fish Clan ancestor opening a backdoor for her, what did she have to fear? The last Black Ball world turned out to be just a formality. Everything that Enlin had worked so hard for was all for Lan Xiaoni. How infuriating! He gritted his teeth in the face of this completely unreasonable trial, but there was nothing he could do. Not only was the terrifying power of the divine Tao imbued within the blue spear destroying his vitality, but it had also sealed off his meridians, consciousness, and sea of vital energy. Without a powerful external force, there was no way he could break through this restriction. An expression of despair appeared on Enlin's face. If things continued like this, his enemies wouldn't even have to do anything. He was going to die from excessive blood loss. Lan Xiaoni was going to take his treasures and leave this tomb before he died. Was he going to die here, He gripped onto the spear and tried to pull it out. He let loose an enraged roar, but he couldn't muster any strength, as if he were trying to pull out a nail that had been rooted into his body. Lan Xiaoni's body shuddered slightly upon hearing Enlin's roar, and her blue eyes gradually regained clarity. She turned toward Enlin, who was struggling to break free. If I take away his storage ring, what will happen to him? That's not something you should be worried about. He's your competitor, and you've only met each other in this tomb. What does his fate have to do with you? Shihaizi's voice sounded again. He'll die, right? Lan Xiaoni asked in a faint voice. Shihaizi fell silent. The answer was obvious. As long as they didn't do anything, Enlin would slowly die no matter how powerful his life force was after his heart had been pierced. Big Boss Enlin. Lan Xiaoni called out softly as she stared at Enlin with tears in her blue eyes, which were filled with reluctance and conflict. Enlin had never thought that Lan Xiaoni would look at him like this. Indeed, the two of them had been competitors from the very beginning. It was understandable that Enlin had the upper hand because of his power. Similarly, the tables had turned now. Lan Xiaoni had relied on her bloodline to forcefully cheat, so she couldn't be blamed for that. Hence, Enlin was very surprised to see this expression on Lan Xiaoni's face. A hint of hope lit up in Enlin's heart. Could it be that she was going to, I'm sorry? Lan Xiaoni wiped away her tears and ran toward the storage ring. Enlin. All right, this was the cruel and kept-up reality. He had fallen at the hands of this shameless tomb builder, so there was nothing he could do aside from yelling at Enlin. Lan Xiaoni picked up Enlin's storage ring and carefully put it on her finger. She stared at the storage ring on her finger and fell into a daze for a moment. In the end, she took a deep breath, and a look of determination gradually appeared in her eyes. Lan Xiaoni turned and flew toward Enlin at high speed. Roar! A series of terrifying flaming dragons roared as they pounced toward the blue figure crossing the river of flames. Blue Spirit Ice Bridge. Lan Xiaoni let loose a clear cry, and a white bead flashed as an ice bridge exuding an extremely frosty aura extended from both ends, as if it were going to freeze everything in its path. The flaming dragons crashed into the ice bridge, causing it to tremor violently, but it did not melt. Lan Xiaoni transformed into a streak of blue light and successfully crossed the river of flames before continuing toward Enlin. Enlin looked at the figure that had suddenly turned around and flew toward him. He could see the determination on Lan Xiaoni's face, and he momentarily forgot about the situation he was in. Have you gone mad? Lan Xiaoni pursed her lips tightly as her eyes lingered on the spear in Enlin's chest. I haven't gone mad. I just feel like the setting of one treasure per ball of light is correct, so there must be treasures in this world. A vibrant smile appeared on her face as she continued, hence, I feel like this spear that was able to puncture your body must be a treasure of this world. How could I, Lan Xiaoni, not take something that's so valuable? This spear is mine for sure. Lan Xiaoni turned a deaf ear to his words, and through her astonishing willpower, she broke through the range of the flames and entered the poisonous miasma without any hesitation. The poisonous mist was extremely corrosive and seeped into by Zhu's barrier. The luster of Lan Xiaoni's skin gradually dimmed as a result of the poisonous miasma. The burned areas had even decayed, and inky black pus and blood flowed from them. Not only did the poison stay on the surface, but it also seeped into his flesh and bones, bringing him indescribable pain. The scales on the glossy blue fishtail fell off piece by piece. Blood splashed everywhere, but it continued to move forward. Lan Xiaoni's entire body was trembling from the pain, but she still stubbornly pressed forward. She had no path of retreat, and she had already abandoned it a long time ago. Finally, the blue figure broke through the poisonous miasma and successfully arrived at the core area of the sacrificial altar. I did it! Lan Xiaoni forced a smile onto her face. Her flawlessly carved features were now a little hideous from the poisonous blood and charred wounds. No one knew just how much pain she had endured. The excruciating pain of being plunged into a frying pan and being devoured by countless poisons still made her body tremble instinctively. She dragged her tattered body and slowly crawled toward Enlin while wagging her tail. Along the way, she left behind a trail of black blood and fallen scales. Enlin was finally unable to maintain his composure. He clenched his trembling fists as he stared at the mermaid crawling toward him. Have you gone insane? If I don't go crazy, you'll die. Lan Xiaoni crawled over to Enlin with a determined expression, as if there were flames burning in her eyes. Enlin looked at the mermaid who had been so severely wounded that her facial features could no longer be seen. Doesn't it hurt? Lan Xiaoni gripped the spear tightly with her charred hands and pulled it out. She exerted force, and the charred wounds on her body were torn open again. She burst into tears. Of course it hurts. How could it not hurt? But if you die here, it'll hurt even more. The mermaid princess used all of her remaining strength to pull the spear out from Enlin's body. Her wrist was sliced open again, and what little blood remained flowed out onto her arm. Spirit Fish Divine Blood Mystical Technique, Fish Dragon Dance. An earth-shattering dragon roar erupted as boundless power surged toward the spear. Boom! The blue spear finally left the blue boulder and Enlin's body. Lan Xiaoni's body slowly plummeted toward the ground, and her feeble arms were unable to even hold onto the spear. Finally, I did it. In the next instant, her slender waist was encircled by a muscular arm. Enlin looked at the woman in his arms with a smile. Oi, you dropped your spear. Lan Xiaoni smiled. Before she had a chance to say anything, Enlin interjected, I'll keep it for you for now. Enlin quickly removed the storage ring from Lan Xiaoni's hand as he spoke before stowing the spear into the storage ring. He then placed the storage ring on his own finger in a very natural manner. Lan Xiaoni, why is it that I risked my life twice to save a dog? Lan Xiaoni was so enraged that she coughed up blood, and she began to sob again. Am I going to die? Don't worry, you'll be fine with me here, Enlin assured her. Lan Xiaoni was a little more reassured upon hearing this. She was very prone to impulsive actions, and only now did she feel a sense of lingering fear. She really didn't want to die. Enlin swallowed an immortal pill to ensure his own survival before pulling out a red jade coffin and placing Lan Xiaoni into the coffin. Lan Xiaoni's tears flowed down her face again. You even prepared a coffin for me, and you said I'd be fine. Lan Xiaoni soon realized that she was wrong. This coffin was able to absorb the surrounding energy and transform it into powerful life force energy to heal her injuries. Open your mouth, Enlin commanded. Lan Xiaoni didn't know what Enlin was doing, but she did as she was told. Enlin placed the final regenerative immortal pill into Lan Xiaoni's mouth. Lan Xiaoni swallowed the immortal pill, and she was a little touched. So you still have a conscience. Enlin pursed his lips. This stupid fish sure was easy to pacify. Her mood had improved so quickly? By the way, move your eyes away. I'm so ugly right now. You're not allowed to see me like this. Lan Xiaoni seemed to have realized something, and she scolded in a gentle voice. Enlin rolled his eyes. You're about to die from your injuries, and that's what you're focused on? Had this mermaid princess's brain been fried? However, Lan Xiaoni's injuries were indeed quite severe. Her snowy white skin was either charred black or rotted away, and it was a gruesome sight to behold. and Lin's heart throbbed with pain at the sight of Lan Xiaoni in her current state. He thought back to everything Lan Xiaoni had done and said, and he was at a loss for what to do. "I told you to stop looking," Lan Xiaoni scolded. "All right." And Lin nodded before sitting down to meditate to recover from his injuries. Everything fell silent. Only the sound of bubbles popping could be heard. "Big Boss and Lin, am I an idiot?" After what seemed like an eternity, Lan Xiaoni spoke again. "That's right. You risked your life to save someone who indirectly killed your fiancé. You really are an idiot." And Lin didn't deny it. "He's not my fiancé." Lan Xiaoni immediately flared up with rage, and she began to cough up blood again. "I admit that I was once attracted to his looks, and I thought a marriage alliance like this wasn't a bad thing. However, I risked my life to save him, but he chose to run away without any hesitation, so I sentenced him to death. Thank God he didn't touch me. Otherwise, all of the Black Fox tribe living beings would die." Lan Xiaoni's voice gradually softened. As expected, men who are too handsome are all bad apples. Men with ugly looks like you are much more reliable. And Lin, this compliment was truly refreshing and refined. Chapter 1055. Lan Xiaoni looked at An Lin, who was standing outside the Blood Soul Jade coffin, with a pleading expression. "Big Boss An Lin, I'm your savior now, can you return my storage ring?" An Lin chuckled. "Underling Lan, isn't it only right for an underling to save a big boss?" Lan Xiaoni's lips twitched, but she seemed to have grown accustomed to An Lin's shamelessness and didn't bring it up again. She was only feeling a little sorry for herself. Even she didn't know why she had made that choice. She simply didn't want to see An Lin die, so she did it without any consideration for the consequences, nor did she think about whether she would die or not. As for their conversation, she selectively ignored it. Both of them fell silent as they silently recovered from their injuries. The cave world fell silent. After what felt like an eternity. "Underling Lan," An Lin suddenly said. What is it?" Lan Xiaoni opened her blue eyes to look at An Lin, only to find that An Lin was still abiding by his promise not to look at her. "Thank you," An Lin said. Lan Xiaoni faltered slightly before a sense of accomplishment welled up in her heart. "So you know how to say that. How are you going to thank me?" An Lin looked at the ground of the sacrificial altar in the distance. There was a long trail of blood interspersed with faint fish scales, as if it were a bridge connecting hell and heaven. He said in a gentle voice, "As your big boss, I'll protect you from now on." An Lin's voice was extremely firm, as if he had just made an extremely important decision. Lan Xiaoni sniffled as tears welled up in her eyes. "Thank you, big boss." An underling had officially become an official member, so he had a big boss to protect now. This was something An Lin could do for Lan Xiaoni. She had risked her life to save his life, so he definitely wouldn't stand by when she was being bullied. 2 hours later, An Lin's injuries were almost completely healed. He stood up and surveyed his surroundings. Other than the flaming river that flowed continuously, his surroundings were extremely quiet. It was just like before. An Lin took another glance at Lan Xiaoni. Lan Xiaoni's burns had already been healed by the blood jadeite soul coffin and the immortal pill, and scabs had already formed over her skin. Her smooth, snowy white skin had reappeared, and new scales had also appeared on her tail. She was no longer in her rotting state, and the ugly fish had reverted back to a beautiful fish. The mermaid's burns were basically cured, but the poison that had penetrated deep into her bones still needed a lot of time to be completely removed. Lan Xiaoni detected An Lin's gaze, and she looked into his eyes as a vibrant smile appeared on her face. "Big Boss An Lin, are we going to continue? My injuries are almost healed. I can come out now." An Lin immediately shook his head. "No, the toxins in your body have not been completely cleared. You'd better take a good rest here. I'll go take a look around first." "No, I want to go with you." Lan Xiaoni struggled to crawl out of the coffin. "If Shihaisi comes after you again, he won't do anything to you with me around." Unlin fell silent as he looked at Lan Xiaoni, who had volunteered to be his human shield. At this moment, Lan Xiaoni had already jumped out of the coffin, and she spun around with a smile on her face. "See, Big Boss Unlin, I told you I was fine." Erg. She spat out another mouthful of black blood. "Unlin, Lan Xiaoni, what if I told you? This is a natural process of detoxification, would you believe me?" Lan Xiaoni pouted as she looked at Unlin with a pitiable expression. Unlin's lips twitched as he pointed at the coffin. "Get the F***ck back into the coffin right now, right now." Lan Xiaoni's body trembled slightly, but she could only lie back into the coffin with an aggrieved expression in the face of Unlin's tyrannical might. For some reason, a hint of sweetness welled up in her heart at the sight of Unlin's enraged expression. Unlin then released Gundam 3 and Yao Ji from his storage ring before instructing them to protect Lan Xiaoni. Only then did he begin his exploration of this world. After Lan Xiaoni risked her life to save Unlin, Shi never appeared again. Even so, Unlin didn't dare to let his guard down. He unleashed his divine sense to its fullest extent while holding the vermilion bird mirror and the brick in his hands at the same time. That's right, in the face of this type of power that was beyond his abilities, only cheat-like items would be able to keep it at bay. The vermilion bird mirror and the brick were the best choices. Unlin arrived at the blue rectangular block before gently stroking the cracks on its surface. A massive hole had been punctured into this block by Shihizi's spear, but the energy fluctuations emanating from it were still extremely powerful. Divine inspection technique. A string of information began to appear in his mind. Sea Heart Stone, a crystallization formed by the convergence of the power of the earth and the ocean in the depths of the West Sea. It is a top-tier container for weapon refinement and is a divine rank material. Unlin's eyes lit up. Another divine rank material. Furthermore, this was an extremely rare treasure that could be used to refine weapons. It looked like he had basically gathered all of the materials needed to refine a divine tool. A peculiar feeling welled up in Unlin's heart. It was as if all of the treasures he had obtained in these ruins were all for the sake of giving him a chance to refine a divine tool. He shook his head and discarded this peculiar thought. Perhaps this was just the tomb owner's hobby of collecting treasures. He liked to let trial-takers experience the peculiar feeling of being able to summon a divine tool after collecting enough treasures. Unlin picked up the Sea Heart Stone without any hesitation and stowed it into his storage ring. He thought for a moment before carefully pulling out the blue spear from his storage ring. This spear was materialized from Shihizi's power of the divine Tao, and it was something that could easily pierce through his divine body and the Sea Heart Stone. As such, he couldn't be too careful. In all honesty, if this spear really was materialized from a simple condensation of the power of the divine Tao, then there was no way that it would remain in its original state for so long. Even after putting it into his storage ring, there was still no change. This was far too strange. Unlin was worried that Shihizi would be alerted by the appearance of this spear. His entire body tensed up, and he looked nervously at the nearby space. After seeing that there wasn't any commotion, he felt a little reassured and used his divine inspection technique on the spear. Soon, information regarding the spear surged into his mind. Armor-piercing divine spear, materialized from Shihizi's power of the divine Tao and true intent of the divine Tao. It contains Shihizi's paramount understanding of the Tao of water attacks and can be absorbed for observation. Unlin faltered slightly upon receiving this information. As expected, this spear wasn't just a simple body of energy. It was also imbued with Shihizi's understanding of the Tao. This was equivalent to tossing him an inheritance. Even though the method was a little violent, it was still a good result. Unlin joined his hands in a salute toward the nearby space. Thanks. Shihizi's attempt to outsmart him made Unlin feel extremely satisfied. Unlin wore a content expression, and he was just about to put the spear back into his storage ring when he turned toward the nearby coffin with a thoughtful expression. He still remembered what he had said in the past. Why don't I fulfill my promise now? Chapter 1056. This spear was imbued with Shihaizi's Tao intent. If he took the spear back and carefully observed it, he would most likely be able to attain a lot of enlightenment in the Tao of water-type attacks. Unlin could take it back and slowly study it, but in reality, the most suitable person to possess this spear was Lan Xiaoni, who was also a member of the Spirit Fish clan just like Shihaizi. He thought about it for a moment before making his way over to Lan Xiaoni and handing the spear over to her. Lan Xiaoni's hands were crossed over her smooth and flat abdomen as she lay silently on the coffin. She looked up at Unlin with her bright eyes, and her expression was a little dazed, as if she had yet to come to her senses. She was a little confused. What is it? This spear. Unlin grabbed onto Lan Xiaoni's slender hand and placed the spear in her hand. Take it. This spear belongs to you anyway. I was only taking care of it for you. Studying the power within it will be very beneficial to you. Lan Xiaoni blushed at the sight of Unlin holding onto her hand, and she instinctively replied, She then seemed to realize what this spear represented. This was Shihaizi's inheritance. Lan Xiaoni's eyes widened in shock as she stared at Unlin. You're really going to give me a treasure like this? Unlin replied in a matter-of-fact manner, This is a reward that I can bestow upon my underlings who have performed well. Lan Xiaoni gripped onto the spear tightly, and tears welled up in her eyes as she burst into tears again. Wah! Big Boss Unlin, you're the best! Unlin nodded in exasperation at the sight of the mermaid, who was about to burst into tears again, and left her to vent her emotions. He looked at the spatial passageway on the other side of the river, and a faint smile appeared on his face. It looks like this tomb isn't very friendly toward foreign living beings. I really want to know how much power you've left behind here. Unlin was already prepared to bash Shihaizi's statue as soon as he got out of here. If Lan Xiaoni had chosen to run away, then wouldn't he really have died here? He couldn't tolerate this injustice any longer. He had to teach Shihaizi a lesson. He began to wander around this glowing world, searching for any treasures he might have missed or left behind. Unfortunately, other than a few fire dragons emerging from the flaming river, there didn't seem to be anything special. Unlin even used his powerful body to dive into the depths of the flaming river to investigate the situation. In the end, he only found some abnormally dense fire essence at the bottom of the river. There were no treasures. Sigh, looks like the Sea Heart Stone is the only treasure left. Unlin sighed softly. He had nothing to do, so he returned to the coffin and unleashed his evergreen technique to speed up Lan Xiaoni's recovery. A rich green light lit up the entire space, and Lan Xiaoni lay down comfortably under the green light with her eyes narrowed in bliss. This is probably what love feels like, right? What a beautiful light! Lan Xiaoni couldn't help but praise. Unlin, another 2 hours passed. Lan Xiaoni's injuries had been completely healed. An immortal pill, a coffin, and Unlin's second-stage evergreen technique combined together was no joke. As long as she wasn't dead, her recovery speed was nothing to scoff at. Thank you, Big Boss Unlin, I've recovered. Lan Xiaoni sprang out of the coffin with a dainty smile on her face. Ever since Unlin had promised to protect her, she had become a lot less reserved around him, and she had become a lot more intimate with him. Unlin smiled. Seeing as you've recovered, let's go back. All right. Lan Xiaoni nodded obediently. Aside from her straightforward personality, Lan Xiaoni was actually quite easy to get along with. Let's go, I'll take you out of here. Unlin held on to Lan Xiaoni's warm, soft hand as he unleashed his 6 divine flames and 1 holy flame at the same time, materializing a thick suit of flaming armor around their bodies as they charged toward the poisonous mist and scorching flames without any fear. The poisonous mist and flames that almost killed Lan Xiaoni were all repelled by the flames on Unlin's armor. They continued onward with an unstoppable force, piercing through the entire perilous realm. Lan Xiaoni looked at Enlin beside her with a sense of security in her heart. It was as long as he was here, all difficulties could be easily resolved and she didn't have to fear any danger. The two of them crossed over the flaming river before entering the spatial passageway that Shi Haizi had opened up. A powerful spatial warp swept over them, and they arrived in an empty room again. Enlin immediately pulled out his evil-slaying sword at the sight of the statue of Shi Haizi. "Stinky fish, I'm going to kill you today." He immediately unleashed a sword strike toward the statue as he spoke. An inky black sword projection flashed through the air like a crescent moon, whistling through the air with an extremely powerful might. Boom! A powerful blue enchantment barrier suddenly appeared to block Enlin's attack. The statue of Shi Haizi suddenly spoke again. "Congratulations to the two fated ones for successfully passing the trial of the Black Ball of Light. I hope you can take the treasures and revitalize your tribe." Enlin glowered at Shi Haizi with an enraged expression. "Senior Shi Haizi, tell me, why did you try to kill me in the world of the Ball of Light? Has the fairness of the trial of the ancient tomb been fed to dogs by you?" The statue of Shi Haizi didn't reply. Instead, it stood silently on the spot like an ordinary statue. Enlin chuckled coldly. He opened the back door but didn't give an explanation. Was he faking his death? "Big Boss Enlin, let's go back. We've already taken the treasures anyway," Lan Xiaoni persuaded in a soft voice. She was actually a little terrified of Shi Haizi. After all, the scene of Shi Haizi nailing Enlin to the Sea Heart Stone with his spear was simply too terrifying. Seeing as they had already obtained the treasures, she felt like there was no point in suffering this humiliation. All she had to do was leave silently. However, Enlin didn't think the same way. He had almost been played to death, so he was still fuming with rage. He turned toward the statue, only to find that it was staring blankly into space, completely motionless. Enlin suddenly yelled, "Shi Haizi, you stupid C***NT. Lan Xiaoni." Shi Haizi didn't respond. Enlin refused to back down. "Shi Haizi doesn't have a D***CK. Lan Xiaoni." Shi Haizi suddenly turned and glowered at Enlin. "F***CK off now that you've got the treasures." He glowered at Lan Xiaoni as he spoke. Lan Xiaoni's body shuddered, and she hid behind Enlin in fear. "Shi Haizi." Enlin was ecstatic at the sight of Shi Haizi's darkened expression. Sure enough, Shi Haizi was quite displeased that his treasures had been taken by an outsider. "Shi Haizi, aren't you going to give me some compensation for what you've done to me?" Enlin didn't leave right away. "If you don't leave now, do you want to be nailed by me again?" Shi Haizi spoke in a cold voice. Enlin spread open his arms and stared at Shi Haizi with a cold smile on his face. "Why don't you come and nail me? Do you really think I'm afraid of you? You're just a remnant power. Let's see how long you can keep up your arrogance." He held a sword in one hand and a mirror in the other, and an extremely mocking smile appeared on his face. Shi Haizi was so enraged that the rocks all over his body began to tremble, and he opened and closed his hands, as if he really was going to attack. However, a premonition suddenly made him calm down. "I'm sorry, Mr. Enlin. This is all my fault. You might not believe me, but this is actually a part of the trial. Furthermore, you've taken all of the treasures, so there's really no compensation. Please leave." Shi Haizi's voice suddenly became gentle and extremely sincere. Lan Xiaoni was astonished as she stared blankly at the scenes unfolding before her eyes. Never would she have thought that Enlin would actually make the high priest of the Spirit Fish clan apologize to him. Enlin nodded with elation. "The treasures aren't the key point. The key point is your attitude. Why didn't you do this from the beginning? Sigh. It's a good thing to learn from one's mistakes. Don't do it again." The veins on Shi Haizi's statue bulged. Chapter 1057. Enlin didn't look at the enraged Shi Haizi. He gestured to Lan Xiaoni before returning to the passageway. He had scolded Shihaizi and forced Shihaizi to apologize, so he had achieved his objective. Shihaizi had almost killed him, but he wasn't crazy enough to attack Shihaizi with his sword. Shihaizi didn't want to attack Enlin for some reason, but from the enchantment barrier that he had set up, it appeared that he had left behind quite a bit of power. There was no need for Enlin to fight to the death with Shihaizi over something like this. The two of them returned along the passageway before arriving at the fork in the road. There were 2 gates and 1 key. Enlin had used the key to open the gate to the tomb treasure vault, but he had lost the opportunity to open the gate to the secrets of the 2 tribes. Those secrets would forever be buried at the bottom of the ocean. Lan Xiaoni looked at the other tightly shut gate with a hint of disappointment before wagging her tail and returning to the main passageway. "Hold on," Enlin suddenly said. Lan Xiaoni paused and turned around with a confused expression. "What is it, Big Boss Enlin?" Enlin pointed to the other tightly shut gate with a smile. "Underling Lan, there are secrets that will determine the fate of your tribe inside. Don't you want to go in?" Lan Xiaoni didn't expect Enlin to bring this up, and she faltered slightly before nodding. "I want to go in, but we've already chosen the tomb treasure vault, and we don't have the key anymore. How are we supposed to enter this gate?" "Who said we have to have a key to enter this gate?" "The tomb owner said we have to choose one of the 2, so we have to choose one of the 2? Enlin silently drew his evil-slaying sword, and his aura exploded forth. "As long as you have power, even rules can be broken." Lan Xiaoni's pupils contracted in shock. "Could it be that you— that's right, only children do multiple-choice questions. I want all of these treasures and secrets." Enlin let loose a clear cry, and a black sword projection flashed through the air before crashing down upon the gate. Terrifying sword might exploded forth, causing the entire passageway to tremor and crack open. A hint of excitement welled up in Lan Xiaoni's heart upon hearing Enlin's declaration. Her beautiful eyes stared at the tightly shut door, only to find that there was a faint blue barrier covering the door, which blocked Enlin's sword power, and the door remained unscathed. "Big Boss Enlin, this is a protective spell technique left behind by the High Priestess. How can we break it with our power?" Lan Xiaoni was a little disappointed. "As your boss, let me teach you another lesson." Enlin gripped his sword with both hands as his aura skyrocketed, climbing straight to the return to void stage. His black cape fluttered wildly behind him as boundless darkness engulfed the surrounding space. "Don't say that it's impossible before you give it your all." The evil-slaying sword fell toward the tightly shut gate. At this moment, the world turned dark. Supreme Nightless Sword Slash was released in its strongest form. The pitch-black and domineering sword light contained a supreme sword intent that could devour all things. It instantly devoured the void in its path, and crashed into the blue barrier. The quiet slash was accompanied by the crisp sound of something shattering. Kacha boom! The barrier shattered, and the gate behind it also exploded at the same time. Never would the 2 high priestesses have thought that after so many years, a freakish soul formation stage cultivator would appear and shatter the rules of the tomb. Lan Xiaoni was also dazed for a moment at the sight of the gate that had been destroyed by Enlin. This was a gate that required a key to open, and there were 2 paths to choose from. This had already become an ingrained concept in her mind. But now it had been shattered by Enlin in the most violent way possible. That's right. The tomb said that they could only choose one path, so did that mean they could only choose one path? Enlin gave her a different answer, which was that as long as they had enough power, they could choose both paths. Enlin didn't like to play by the rules, and he was becoming more and more arrogant. As such, it was only a matter of time before he came up with this idea. Just as Lan Xiaoni was looking at Enlin with admiration on her face, a loud boom and roar erupted from within the treasure vault passageway. "What are you waiting for? Run!" Enlin grabbed Lan Xiaoni's hand and immediately ran into the secret passageway between the 2 tribes. Lan Xiaoni came to her senses, and she was a little fearful as she listened to the roar from the other passageway. Could it be that Senior Shihaizi has caught up to us? And Lin chuckled. Shihaizi is so huge, how could he squeeze into such a narrow passageway? However, we have to be careful in case he attacks us in other ways. We have to end this as quickly as possible. Lan Xiaoni nodded with a firm expression. A blush appeared on her cheeks, and her breathing began to accelerate as a sense of excitement welled up in her heart, as if she were working together with Lin. The two of them quickly ran along the passageway, but the rumbling behind them didn't die down. He's following us! Lan Xiaoni exclaimed. Lin's expression darkened slightly. He could sense that Shihaizi's aura was quickly approaching them. It was quite clear that his act of forcefully destroying the gate had completely enraged Shihaizi. This was a very strange phenomenon. He had clearly left behind something for his juniors, but now that his juniors had a chance to obtain the treasures and secrets at the same time, he was suddenly displeased. Who would have thought that such a huge statue could be shrunk down? It's most likely a fake statue. Lin was a little enraged. Big Boss Lin, let's not talk about that now. It's understandable that the power left behind by a Dao integration stage mighty figure is a little peculiar. Lan Xiaoni couldn't help but interject, shouldn't we be discussing how to deal with the approaching Shihaizi? Don't worry, I've already made preparations. Lin wore a confident expression as he said, come out. Gundam 3 Yaoji, stall that B** starred for me. Gundam 3 and Yaoji immediately rushed back after receiving their instructions. The sound of battle erupted. Meanwhile, Lin and Lan Xiaoni dove headfirst into the secret chamber. This was a secret chamber that was very similar to the treasure vault in the ancient tomb. It was extremely spacious and empty. A gargantuan statue stood at the center of the chamber. This was a huge turtle over a kilometer wide. From the peaceful expression on its face and its eyes, it was most likely a female turtle. Even though I knew that the High Priestess, Tianqinji, was a turtle, I still find it very difficult to accept after seeing this turtle in person. Is this the person that Shihaizi has been pursuing for several hundred years? Isn't the Spirit Fish clan's sense of beauty very similar to that of humans? Lin was a little astonished. Shihaizi pursuing Tianqinji for several hundred years was like a human mighty figure courting a turtle for several hundred years. It was truly incredible. That's why Senior Shihaizi and Senior Tianqinji are true love that transcends species. Lan Xiaoni snuck a glance at Lin before turning to Tianqinji with a serious expression. Right at this moment, the huge turtle suddenly turned toward Lin. Foolish human, I'm very displeased that you're discussing my relationship with Shihaizi in front of me. Lin. Chapter 1058. It's no use. You have no chance of escaping from us. Shihaizi used his power of the divine Dao to knock aside the oncoming Gundam 3 and Yao Ji before making his way toward Lan Xiaoni in a cold voice. Bastard! Let little Chun go. Shihaizi flared up with rage upon seeing this. The white eyes of the statue instantly turned crimson. Immediately afterward, a humanoid statue with the tail of a fish and the body of a human rushed into the room before roaring, "Ignore them, little Chun! They've already taken my treasures. They forced open this gate." This was clearly an ancient tomb, so why was the power left behind by the mighty figure within it so powerful and intelligent? Lin stowed the photographic crystal into his storage ring before looking down at the tortoise beneath his feet with a speechless expression. This is the first time I've seen a mighty figure reveal their secrets so openly. Isn't it obvious that they're doing this for everyone to see, so this giant tortoise statue was also a living creature? Roar. You're seeking death. How dare you steal the secrets of the two tribes? Lan Xiaoni. A violent collision erupted, accompanied by a female's sharp cry. Holy F***ck, why is it so hard? Lin scratched his head. Tianqinji spoke with a calm expression. You've violated the rules of the tomb and trespassed here. I won't tell you the secrets of the tomb, so you should give up now. White light lit up the entire space, instantly imprinting everything within the crystal. You were just cursing at us a moment ago, why are you welcoming us now? Lan Xiaoni was astonished. What the F***ck was this? Did he have to be so perfunctory? Enlin and Lan Xiaoni drew a sharp intake of breath in unison. Tian Qingji was astonished. You were able to break open the enchantment barrier around the gate? Don't think too much about it. I'm only welcoming you as a formality. I actually don't welcome you at all. The giant tortoise's cold voice sounded again. Looks like I'll have to give out new keys. You're not fated to be here, so you can stay here. Tian Qingji spoke in a cold voice that was filled with supreme authority. Lan Xiaoni was also struck by a powerful force, and she threw up a mouthful of blood before tumbling to the ground. Boom! Enlin's reaction was extremely fast. He instantly tossed the recording crystal into the sky. Big Boss Enlin, Tian Qingji's turtle shell seems to have the ancient text of our tribe engraved on it. Lan Xiaoni stared intently at the patterns on the turtle's back as she suddenly spoke. However, it seemed like Tian Qingji didn't know that they had broken in. Was it because it had only woken up after they had entered the room? Tian Qingji, who had remained calm all this while, finally flew into a rage. You don't know **T. The most dangerous place is also the safest place. Shihaizi suddenly interjected on behalf of his Dao partner. However, the tortoise made of crystals emitted a dazzling multicolored brilliance and blocked Enlin's sword slash and scathed. Enlin was a little confused. What? He was already used to striking first, so he would naturally place the safety of his own side first. Controlling Tian Qingji was the best way to deal with this crisis. Enlin was also puzzled. Why did his attitude change so quickly? Splitting the turtle shell? She quickly realized who it was, and she repressed the urge to scream out loud. The half-crippled Gundam 3 and Yao Ji were also stowed away at this moment. The two silver Gundams flew through the air before tumbling to the ground in the cavernous room, where sparks flew from their bodies. Enlin knew that he had misspoken, and he immediately apologized. I'm sorry, Senior Tian Qingji. We came here to obtain the secrets of the two tribes and change the fate of the two tribes so that we can lead the two tribes to glory again. Enlin. I know the most dangerous place, but the safest place, I don't see it at all. This was an adaptation of Enlin's 6 strikes of the war god Shadow Tiger technique. It created absolute darkness that deprived one of one's 5 senses and divine sense, but instead of attacking, it chose to flee. At this moment, Tian Qingji's body suddenly became crystalline. Crap! Tian Qingji's expression shifted. Enlin and Lan Xiaoni didn't even get a chance to be praised before they were slapped in the face. Heavenly Turtle Seabed Purgatory, Maximum Difficulty, Hell Mode, Activate. A sense of extreme danger welled up in Enlin's heart, and he slashed down with his sword without any hesitation. Enlin felt as if his body had been struck by a massive hammer, and his extremely powerful body of the war god felt as if it were being torn apart as his body flew backward. Tian Qingji. Can you move your sword away from my neck before you say that? Tian Qingji turned toward Enlin with a cold expression. The giant turtle didn't even get a chance to finish its sentence before a resounding boom erupted from outside the gate. He didn't get a chance to say anything before the giant turtle continued, Fated One, welcome to the tomb of me and Shihaizi. Not only that, but Tian Qingji also opened her mouth to blast forth several extremely terrifying beams of divine light. These beams of divine light pierced through space before instantly striking Enlin's body and exploding violently. Enlin, boom! The extremely sharp black sword radiance struck Tian Qingji's head, and the remaining power of the sword radiance even split the vast stone chamber in half. However, this powerful water-type spell technique exploded into countless droplets of water in the face of Tian Qingji's glare. Lan Xiaoni. Lan Xiaoni discovered that she was suddenly being carried toward the exit. She didn't want to defeat Tian Qingji. all she wanted was to stall her enemy for a moment. Unlin. In front of them, a blue energy barrier appeared. The special power of the tomb was activated, and an extremely fearsome spatial power instantly enshrouded Unlin and Lan Xiaoni, upon which the two of them disappeared on the spot. Boom! Tears welled up in Lan Xiaoni's eyes as she rubbed her nose, which was red from the impact. A resigned smile appeared on Unlin's face, but his evil-slaying sword remained pressed against Tianqingji's neck without moving. You want to run? Tianqingji's cold chuckle sounded. So be it. I don't want to use too much of my remaining power to deal with you. In order to preserve my power, I'll have to ask you to go to your two tribes to die. He was just feeling a little relieved that Tianqingji hadn't detected that they had forced their way in when Shihaizi suddenly appeared to disrupt their plans. The entire space instantly became inky black. Tianqingji spoke in a cold voice. Wouldn't it be the safest place to go if we kill all of the beings who have discovered this secret by violating the rules? Unlin's brows furrowed slightly. He clearly couldn't think of a way out of this predicament. Big Boss Unlin. Lan Xiaoni let loose a cry of surprise as she hurriedly made a series of hand seals to summon a massive wave over a kilometer tall, which swept toward the giant turtle. Tianqingji's expression eased slightly upon hearing this. I'm very pleased that you were able to choose between the treasure and the secret of your two tribes. You are all outstanding juniors who know how to look at the bigger picture. Unlin silently pulled out his evil-slaying sword. Senior, we only barged into this gate in order to change the fate of the Heavenly Turtle tribe and the Spirit Fish clan. Please tell us the secret of your two tribes for the sake of the future of your two tribes. Chapter 1059. Unlin was struck by a rush of dizziness. In the next instant, a blue ocean world appeared before his eyes. Boundless water pressure swept toward them, but it was kept at bay by the blue barrier of light unleashed by Lan Xiaoni. Unlin looked around at this continent to find that the ground was completely black, but there were all types of plants that glowed with different colors growing all over it, illuminating the entire underwater world. A series of strange-looking sea mutant beasts were floating around, and their crimson eyes glowed with a dangerous light as they unleashed their powerful auras to their heart's content. They were originally swimming around slowly, but their bodies faltered at the sight of Unlin before pouncing toward Unlin with their cavernous mouths. It was as if this foreign living being was something that they had to eliminate. These pieces of trash think they can hurt me? Unlin drew his evil-slaying sword and unleashed one powerful sword projection after another, instantly slicing the oncoming sea mutant beasts into mincemeat. Blood stained the ocean red, and the stench of blood wafted through the air, attracting even more sea mutant beasts. All of them roared as they pounced toward Unlin, and there was no lack of soul formation stage soul beasts among them. Unlin was like a meat grinder as he led Lan Xiaoni onward, and all of the monsters that approached him were sliced into mincemeat. They continued onward toward the center of the continent. Unlin was feeling extremely vexed by these monsters. It wasn't that these sea mutant beasts were all very powerful, but rather that there were simply too many of them. They were attacking almost non-stop, and anyone would be frustrated if they had to constantly swing their swords. Lan Xiaoni's features paled with fear. If it weren't for Unlin's presence, she would most likely become food in the stomachs of these ferocious beasts in no time. Roar! One sea mutant beast after another roared as they pounced toward Unlin. Some of them were even unleashing powerful sea spell techniques, such as water blades, engulfment vortexes, or lethal poison attacks. There was simply too much to handle. Unlin was able to vanquish all of the attacks with brute force, and all of them were sliced apart with a single sword strike. This was most likely what it meant to be able to vanquish all spells with a single sword strike. Damn it, haven't we already obtained the secrets of the two races? Could this so-called Heavenly Turtle Seabed Purgatory be a mystic realm with other rewards? Unlin asked as he fought. It could also be the trial to obtain the secret of the two tribes. Even though we've obtained the secret, we still have to fight our enemies. Perhaps this is the equivalent of a supplementary ticket? A thoughtful expression appeared on Lan Xiaoni's face as she speculated. And Lin's veins were popping out. What the F***ck was he talking about? Why did he have to pay for a ticket when he had forcefully taken the secret information with his own strength? Speaking of which, Tianqinji wants to use the power of the trial to eliminate us, right? But isn't it wishful thinking to kill me with this level of exotic beast? And Lin sneered. He could sense that the potential of these marine beasts had been completely stimulated, and they had obtained strength far beyond their usual level. However, this power was enough to scare Lan Xiaoni, but it was nothing to him. Humph. Boss and Lin is the best. How could Tianqinji possibly have the insight to estimate your strength? These monsters are just for you to practice your sword arts on, Lan Xiaoni praised in a very natural manner. Underling Lan was becoming more and more adept at cheering him on. And Lin was very pleased as Lan Xiaoni was telling the truth. Howl, a dragon venom whale over 10,000 feet in length let loose a wail of anguish as it was sliced in half by An Lin's sword. Through the two halves of the massive whale's body, An Lin could see that there was an extremely peculiar ship floating on the continent up ahead. This ship was extremely massive, as if it were a massive beast of the deep sea resting on the continent. An Lin estimated that the ship was over 50 kilometers in length, and it was impossible to see the end of it. Just the size of the ship alone struck him with a sense of boundless pressure. A series of inky black cannons extended from within the ship, each of which had a diameter of over a kilometer, creating an extremely intimidating sight. This was undoubtedly an extremely fearsome battleship. However, there were countless massive holes, cracks, and gashes that extended for tens of thousands of meters, further accentuating just how dilapidated this battleship was. As time passed, many glowing underwater plants crawled over the hull of the battleship. The alloy and plants intertwined with one another, causing the dilapidated battleship to exude a peculiar light, making it appear as if it were a beautiful relic that had been left behind. This ship is so beautiful, Lan Xiaoni couldn't help but exclaim. And Lin nodded. In a place like this, the more beautiful something is, the more careful we have to be. Then what do we do? Do we go in? Lan Xiaoni recoiled slightly upon hearing this, and she began to cower again. Of course we have to go in. We won't be able to get out unless we kill the core monsters inside. We can only rely on the mechanisms of the mystic realm to escape from here. An Lin heaved a forlorn sigh. Lan Xiaoni nodded upon hearing this before carefully trailing behind An Lin with Baizhu in her hand. As for her second trump card, the little blue fish, she had already sacrificed it when she rescued An Lin. If she wanted to activate it again, she would have to wait until she got back and ask High Priest Yu Feiyu to summon its soul again. The two of them continued to approach the massive battleship. All of the sea monsters that were charging toward An Lin with no regard for their own safety suddenly stopped after approaching the battleship, as if there was something extremely terrifying within the battleship that struck fear into their hearts and made them unwilling to approach it. An Lin became even more cautious upon seeing this. The closer they got to the battleship, the more insignificant they felt. The two of them first arrived in front of a cannon. This cannon is so huge. It could probably raise an entire island to the ground with a single shot. An Lin clicked his tongue in wonder as he looked at the black cannon. Big Boss An Lin, are we getting too close to the cannon? What if it suddenly fires at us? Lan Xiaoni's heart thumped wildly at the sight of the gargantuan cannon. The cannon had a diameter of over a kilometer, and there was no end in sight. Ha! Fire? An Lin couldn't help but burst into laughter as he flicked Lan Xiaoni's forehead. This massive battleship has been abandoned for who knows how many years. Not only is it extremely old, but it's also in such a tattered state. It's only there to scare people, how can it still be used? An Lin was looking at Lan Xiaoni with an amused expression on his face. Lan Xiaoni stared blankly ahead, and she couldn't help but pat An Lin's shoulder. Big Boss An Lin, look, That cannon seems to be glowing. Unlin turned to look at her. At this moment, a light as bright as the sun was already radiating from the cannon's black hole. Unlin! Boom! An earth-shattering boom erupted. A golden ball of energy exploded on the seabed, and boundless scorching energy swept forth, melting all of the nearby sea monsters into nothingness. Destructive flames lit up the inky black seabed as if it were day. A massive mushroom cloud erupted into the sky, creating a unique sight on the seabed. Chapter 1060. A fearsome explosion erupted on the continent. Violent waves of water swept through all living beings within a radius of over 50 kilometers. Some were knocked flying, others had their bodies torn apart, and all of the sea mutant beasts fled for their lives. The fearsome energy gradually dissipated. A gargantuan crater had appeared at the center of the explosion. Cough, cough, cough. That was way too terrifying. Was it necessary to use a cannon to kill a mosquito? At the center of the crater, a huge black brick was pushed aside. Unlin crawled out from Lan Xiaoni's arms in a disheveled manner. That's right, he had pulled out his chaotic alloy brick in this dire situation and placed it in front of Lan Xiaoni again, so he was unfortunately sandwiched again. It was a pity that the one who suffered the most was not Unlin. Instead, it was Lan Xiaoni who was at the very back. Lan Xiaoni's body was far too soft, so it was quite comfortable for Unlin to crash into her. Instead, it was Lan Xiaoni who was half dead from being rammed into by Unlin. Underling Lan. Are you all right? Unlin shook the unconscious Lan Xiaoni with a concerned expression. Lan Xiaoni slowly regained consciousness, and tears almost flowed from her eyes as she rubbed her body, which was about to fall apart. Thankfully, she knew that she couldn't cry at a critical moment like this, so she forced herself to hold back her tears. I'm fine. Lan Xiaoni stood up with difficulty and massaged her sore chest as she looked up at the massive battleship with a fearful expression. Big Boss Unlin, this battleship can fire cannons. What do we do? Unlin replied with a serious expression. Running away won't solve any problems, so what we have to do is evade the cannons and kill the captain. Lan Xiaoni was astonished. Are you sure there's something called captain on this ship? Unlin. That's not the point. The point is that we can't back down. Thus, the two of them reached an agreement and approached the massive battleship again. They had learned their lesson this time, and they evaded the cannons of the battleship before approaching the bow of the battleship. Under normal circumstances, powerful living beings usually commanded everything at the bow of the battleship. They flew toward the bow of the battleship while unleashing their divine senses to the fullest extent in order to survey their surroundings. Not a single sea monster dared approach the enormous warship. Even though it was surrounded by sea plants and was as dazzling as a pearl, it still appeared incredibly calm. Even the radiance it emitted was cold. It was this deathly silent atmosphere that made Unlin a little nervous. There seems to be a creature up ahead. Unlin's expression changed slightly as he spoke softly. It's a living being from our spirit fish clan. Lan Xiaoni was able to detect this being through her bloodline connection. On the bow deck, the floor was paved with special dark golden essence wood, and there were large and small pits and cracks. Those weren't marks left behind by time, but marks left behind by battles. Many skeletons were scattered across the vast deck. Even though they had been dead for so long, they were still releasing powerful energy waves. It was obvious that their owners were very powerful when they were alive. Unlin looked at the appearance of the skeleton and felt that it was very unfamiliar. Not only was the appearance of the bones extremely strange, but there were also sharp bone spurs on the surface, like a bone hedgehog. He then looked toward the end of the deck to find a mermaid standing outside the control room of the warship. The mermaid had a slender figure, and her pink fishtail rippled through the air as her body hovered in the air. Her inky black hair fell to her waist and danced in the wind. What was worth mentioning was that she was even more scantily clad than Lan Xiaoni. Only her two seashell pieces were protecting her chest, leaving her fair, smooth skin completely exposed. And Lin couldn't help but sigh with emotion. The ancient people sure were open-minded, and he couldn't help but take a few more glances at her with condemnation in his eyes. Lan Xiaoni rolled her eyes upon seeing the change in Lin's expression. She was clearly more beautiful than the mermaid with the pink fishtail, so why was Lin's attention on her? Could it be that wearing scantily clad made it easier for her to attract attention? The mermaid crossed her arms and slowly spread open her pink folding fans as a suffocating killing intent appeared in her eyes at the sight of Lin and the others. "Are you the people my master wants to eliminate?" the mermaid asked in a cold voice. Lan Xiaoni's heart tightened as she prepared for battle. And Lin immediately shook his head. "No." The mermaid faltered slightly upon hearing this. Lan Xiaoni. The atmosphere seemed to have congealed for a split second. The mermaid's train of thought was momentarily disjointed, and she turned to Lin with an embarrassed expression. "My name is Star Dancer, and I am the 9th captain of the Starfire battleship of the Spirit Fish clan." Lan Xiaoni immediately let loose a cry of surprise. "This ancient battleship is the Starfire battleship?" Lin blinked with confusion. "What's the Starfire battleship?" "It's the core strategic weapon of our Spirit Fish clan. It's a mobile battle fortress constructed from all types of star essence stones, and its power is unfathomable. It's said that it can battle Tao integration stage super mighty figures head-on. It mysteriously disappeared during the battle against the ancient heavenly fiend Celestial. Who would have thought that it would be found here?" Cold sweat was pouring down Lan Xiaoni's forehead as she tugged on Lin's sleeve. "Big Boss Lin, this Starfire battleship doesn't look like it's completely destroyed, and there are many weapons that can pose a threat to your safety. You have to be careful." "You're not going to tell me to be careful of the Star Dancer?" Lin was a little perplexed. This senior Star Dancer is clearly nothing more than some kind of residual power. She was at the Return to Void Pinnacle stage when she was alive, so there's no way that much power would remain after her death. Big Boss Lin isn't even afraid of Tianqinji and Shihaizi, so why would he be afraid of her? Lin's lips twitched upon hearing this, and he felt like this made a lot of sense. It had to be said that Lan Xiaoni was very confident in Big Boss Lin. The Star Dancer chuckled coldly upon hearing this. "Looks like I've been underestimated. So be it, I'll make you pay for your underestimation with your deaths." Lin immediately waved a hand at Lan Xiaoni upon hearing this. "Get away from me and yell 666. Lan Xiaoni pursed her lips. She knew that she wouldn't be of much help in a battle of this caliber, so she immediately fled the battlefield. It was also at this moment that an extremely terrifying aura soared into the sky. The Star Dancer waved her fan with her left hand. Rising wind. The hurricane swept toward Lin's body with a boundless torrent of water. Lin assessed the Star Dancer to be around the Return to Void intermediate stage in his mind as he sensed her terrifying power. Of course, an attack of this caliber wouldn't be able to harm him. Falling stars. The fan in the Star Dancer's right hand also began to descend. The light at the bottom of the ocean suddenly dimmed. A sense of peril suddenly welled up in Lin's heart, and he was just about to spring into action when the torrent of water around him suddenly became like powerful tentacles that restricted his movements. So the rising wind attack was only a feint, and the Star Dancer's true intention was to restrict his movements. All of this was in preparation for her falling stars attack. Lin had only just struggled free from the torrent of water when boundless stars imbued with the power of the Star Divine Tao fell like a torrential downpour, sealing off all avenues of retreat. Lin was astonished. Wasn't the Star Dancer a remnant power of the Return to Void Pinnacle stage? Why was she so adept at using the power of the Divine Tao? He didn't even get a chance to do anything before his body was engulfed by countless specks of blue stars. Chapter 1061. An attack imbued with the power of the Divine Tao was more than enough to break through Lin's body of the war god's defenses. Boom, boom, boom. A vast expanse of starlight exploded in front of the Starfire battleship as blue energy wreaked havoc, disintegrating the water at the bottom of the ocean into a vacuum. A smile appeared on the Star Dancer's face as she looked at Enlin, who had been engulfed by the starlight. Arrogant brat, don't you know what hell mode entails? This means that I can unleash the power I had when I was alive for a short period of time. See, this is what you get for underestimating me. Boom. A massive hole was suddenly torn open in the blue starlight, and a blood-stained white figure charged toward Enlin at an extremely fast speed. The Star Dancer's eyelids twitched. Star Leap. Streams of wind revolved around Enlin's evil-slaying sword as it fell. The domineering sharpness was invincible, tearing open a dark trail of absolute vacuum at the bottom of the water. Meanwhile, the Star Dancer disappeared on the spot like a shooting star in a flash. Enlin's wind sword missed its target, and at this moment, a pink fan adorned with blue stars swept toward Enlin at an even faster speed. The Star Dancer instantly appeared beside Enlin before mercilessly swinging her fan toward Enlin's head. Bam! The space around him was flattened and shattered. Enlin felt as if he had been viciously slapped in the face, and his body flew through the air like a cannonball as a vast, mountain-toppling force swept toward him. Flame shooting star. The Star Dancer twisted her slender waist and waved her fan through the air again. The vast power of the divine Tao fused into the fan, and a flaming star that was capable of incinerating all things appeared in the blink of an eye. The terrifying temperatures instantly made the seawater within a radius of close to 10 kilometers churn and churn. Enlin couldn't help but grumble at the sight of the oncoming flaming star. Using the power of flames at the bottom of the ocean? Are you insane? Shouldn't you be using the power of water? A cold smile appeared on the Star Dancer's face. As you wish. She waved her other fan through the air. Cold star. A bright blue star pierced through the air at an even faster speed than the flaming star, freezing the seawater in its wake into glacial ice. Even though there was still some distance between them, Enlin found that his movements had become much slower. It was clear that fire and ice restrained each other. However, the Star Dancer was able to unleash the power of these two stars at the same time, and not only did they not cancel each other out, they were instead mutually reinforcing one another, making the fiery meteor even hotter while the cold star became even colder. Enlin knew that his body wouldn't be able to withstand this ice and fire dual heavens technique. His path of retreat had already been sealed, so he had no choice but to take out the chaotic alloy brick again and use it as a shield. At the same time, he conjured his divine flame armor. Boom! The seawater within a radius of 10,000 meters was incinerated and frozen. The two stars collided with the black brick, but a portion of the resulting explosion bypassed the black brick and struck Enlin instead. After all, this was an area of effect attack. The black brick couldn't completely block it. The destructive power crashed into Enlin's flaming armor, upon which it was instantly pulverized. Enlin was struck again. Even though the energy had been significantly weakened, his organs were still damaged by the scorching and cold powers at the same time, and blood trickled down the corners of his lips. Who would have thought that you would be able to last so long against me? A hint of surprise appeared in the Star Dancer's eyes, but she didn't stop there. Instead, she lashed her tail through the air toward Enlin. Enlin stood on the spot, panting heavily. His body was charred black, and his hair had been burned to a crisp, but there were also shards of ice on his body. It was quite clear that this ice and fire dual heavens technique was a little too much for him. A smug expression appeared on the Star Dancer's face upon seeing Enlin's current state. She quickly closed in on him, and the power of the divine Tao erupted from her fans again as she prepared to deliver the final blow to Enlin. Die. A cold voice sounded. She knew that Enlin was already at the end of his tether. The Star Dancer's attacks were extremely swift and decisive, and her fans danced through the air in a graceful dance. The edges of her pink star fan suddenly became as crimson as blood, and the power of the divine Tao imbued with the power of the stars imbued with the power of the divine Tao imbued with the power of the stars, slicing Enlin's body into 3 sections like a pair of scythes. However, before she even had a chance to smile in victory, the 3 sections of her body melted into the ocean like liquid. The star dancer's pupils contracted. A water clone? The space around her suddenly plunged into boundless darkness. Origin energy of the netherworld. Shadow Tiger. Enlin's power had suddenly skyrocketed, and he unleashed a sword strike that he had been preparing for a long time with his evil-slaying sword, catching the star dancer off guard. The star dancer wanted to parry or evade, but it was already too late. Whoosh! The evil-slaying sword sliced a massive gash into her snowy white skin, extending from her collarbone all the way to her waist. If it weren't for the fact that she had activated her power of the divine Tao to defend herself, she would have most likely been sliced in half. The star dancer let loose a pained moan as she hurtled back in retreat, and her blood quickly dissipated in the water. Light returned to heaven and earth. Enlin continued to press his advantage as he tossed his evil-slaying sword through the air. 6 strikes of the war god, 100 sword technique. 99 white celestial swords materialized in the blink of an eye. Even though they were deep in the ocean, the peerlessly sharp sword intent was still able to slice through the seawater to create a vacuum zone. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. 99 celestial swords flew toward the star dancer. The star dancer gritted her teeth as she quickly swung her fans toward the powerful celestial swords in order to defend herself against Enlin's relentless attacks. The flying swords clashed with one another, and the surging currents transformed the ocean floor into a perilous realm. The star dancer blocked the 99 sword strikes with extreme difficulty. The 100th sword formed by the evil-slaying sword sliced through the dark currents, parting the ethereal space before instantly striking the star dancer's fans with extremely powerful sword intent. The white sword projection pierced through the air for several kilometers with unstoppable force. The star dancer's petite body was propelled into the battleship by the sword projection, where she crashed through the extremely sturdy alloy walls. Enlin heaved a light sigh of relief at the sight of the star dancer being slashed into the battleship. He was just about to give chase when another resounding boom suddenly erupted. This was an extremely long and drawn-out boom, as if it were going to erupt throughout heaven and earth. The Starfire battleship, which stretched as far as the eye could see, suddenly began to glow with a faint blue light. "I admit that you're quite powerful, but that's as far as you can go. I've already fused as one with the Starfire battleship, so you're about to face the power of the entire Starfire battleship." The Star Dancer's voice sounded again, and there was a hint of madness and determination in her voice. Enlin stared at the massive battleship before him with astonishment on his face. "Fused as one with the battleship? Do you think you're a ship girl?" His voice had only just fallen when the countless cannons at the top of the battleship turned toward the tiny human in the blink of an eye. The Star Dancer's mocking voice sounded, "I'm a professional at killing mosquitoes with cannons." Enlin. Chapter 1062. An extremely powerful sense of peril welled up in Enlin's heart. He immediately pulled out his brick and positioned it in front of him. The cannons at the top of the battleship weren't as large as the cannons on either side, but that didn't mean they were any weaker. On the contrary, the cannons at the top of the battleship were the true main cannons. Just as these thoughts were running through his mind, one of the cannons opened fire. There was no boom, which was a rare occurrence. Instead, the energy rippled outward like a fan, instantly enshrouding Enlin within as an extremely powerful spatial sealing power emanated from it. Enlin's expression shifted. Realm-piercing nail. A red streak of light pierced through space and broke through the spatial sealing power. At this moment, a golden light burst forth like the sun. Boom boom boom, 9 extremely powerful electromagnetic cannons were fired at the same time at an undetectable speed. The seawater surged violently, sending shockwaves hundreds of kilometers away. Each of the electromagnetic cannons was powerful enough to pulverize a return-to-void stage mighty figure's body. Unlin had only just broken through the spatial ceiling power, so he didn't have any time to evade. Just like that, the electromagnetic cannon struck the black brick with extreme accuracy, and its terrifying power instantly tore through Unlin's defensive barrier before knocking him back several dozen kilometers along with the brick. However, this was only a prelude. It was a prelude to opening up distance. It was a way to protect the battleship from the terrifying shock waves. A dark red cannon had already finished charging. Boom! An earth-shattering boom erupted. Red energy erupted forth, instantly annihilating the seawater in its wake and shattering the space in its wake. It struck Unlin's brick at a speed faster than lightning. The Starfire battleship's main cannon, the Starfire Annihilation Cannon, had been fired. In that instant, the red energy was imbued with the power of annihilation, engulfing everything around it, creating a circular space of annihilation that annihilated all the elements within. Big Boss and Lan Xiaoni's features paled, and she finally couldn't help but yell. She had warned Lin to be careful of the Starfire battleship, but what she was most worried about still happened. The Star Dancer had the authority to control the Starfire battleship. Not only that, but she could also use the Starfire battleship's main energy cannon. That was a cannon that could blast Tao integration stage super mighty figures. Even though he could only unleash less than a tenth of his original power, this was still a power that could pose a threat to Tao integration stage super mighty figures. How could soul formation stage cultivators like them imagine this? Lan Xiaoni was extremely concerned about Lin's situation, but she didn't dare to go over. She was afraid that she would only cause trouble for Lin if she went over, so she was at a complete loss for what to do. However, just because she did not move did not mean that the warship would spare her. Both she and Lin were existences that the two high priests had ordered to be eliminated. The position she was standing at was actually within the range of the battleship's perception. The reason why they hadn't dealt with her before was because she posed little threat. That was why they had made Lin their top priority. One of the cannons began to turn toward Lan Xiaoni. Lan Xiaoni's expression shifted, and she didn't even have a chance to evade before the energy cannon blasted forth, sending devastating flames hurtling toward her. Her petite body was like duckweed on the ocean that was about to be engulfed by the massive waves. Right at this moment, an inky black crescent moon sliced the oncoming energy cannon in half, as if it were a rock parting a river. A familiar figure once again appeared in front of her. Tears welled up in Lan Xiaoni's eyes. Big Boss Lin, I'm so glad you're all right. Lin looked at the battleship in the distance. You didn't even spare a useless fish. Is this how you should behave as an ancestor of the Spirit Fish clan? Lan Xiaoni. Even though Lin seemed to be protecting her, why did it sound so heart-wrenching? A heart-wrenching feeling welled up in the mermaid princess' heart. You've broken the rules of the tomb. You're not the fated ones that Master is looking for, so you should be punished. The Star Dancer's voice sounded again. At the same time, countless cannons began to turn toward Lin and Lan Xiaoni. The pitch-black mouths of the cannons were completely silent, but an extremely terrifying sense of pressure began to sweep toward them. Hee, even the energy cannon on the front of your battleship can't do anything to me, so what do you have to deal with me? Lin's expression remained calm as a cold smile appeared on his face, and he appeared to be extremely confident. In reality, he was actually quite scared. The chaotic alloy brick wasn't the only reason why that cannon blast had been unleashed. It was all thanks to Gundam 3 and Yao Ji, who had just recovered from absorbing spirit stones, that he was able to survive the blast at the cost of being crippled again. If another cannon blast like the one just now were unleashed, he would most likely be severely wounded. Lan Xiaoni's heart began to race at the sight of so many cannons, and she silently hid behind Lin. She adjusted her position and prepared a cushioning spell technique so that her chest wouldn't be crushed by Lin's back again. She was quite familiar with this tactic. Don't worry, I won't disappoint you. No return to void stage mighty figure will be able to defend against my next attack. The Star Dancer's voice sounded again. And Lin chuckled. I'm a soul formation stage powerful being. Just because return to void stage mighty figures can't defend against it doesn't mean I can't defend against it. The Starfire battleship fell silent, as if it were feeling a little awkward. A few seconds later, boundless white light converged on a certain circular pattern on the battleship. That's a starry sky formation. She's going to fuse her power of the Star Divine Tao into the battleship to unleash the starry sky cannon. Lan Xiaoni's expression shifted as she spoke in a panicked voice. At this moment, an extremely terrifying aura began to proliferate through the air, and the patterns on the formation connected with the power of the stars before quickly converging and amplifying. The massive battleship, over 50 kilometers in size, lit up, as if it was infusing all of the power of this massive seabed beast into this attack. And Lin suddenly burst into laughter. Come on. Let me see the battleship's most powerful attack. Don't disappoint me. Big Boss and Lin, the Starfire battleship's most powerful attack is the star-shattering cannon, not this, Lan Xiaoni cautioned. And Lin, can't you let me show off first? Why are you bickering with me at a time like this? Just as An Lin turned to Lan Xiaoni with a resentful expression, boom. The power of the starry sky formation was completely unleashed. The Star Dancer's power of the Divine Tao erupted forth with its most powerful might. Countless dazzling stars were swept along by the white energy like a river, and they were like a boundless galaxy that instantly engulfed An Lin and Lan Xiaoni. However, a strange turn of events also unfolded at this moment. The terrifying river of stars was engulfed by something, as if it had fallen into a bottomless pit. At the same time, another dazzling river of stars erupted forth with unstoppable power before instantly crashing into the Starfire battleship, tearing through its thick protective barrier before hurtling toward a certain direction. An Lin held the vermilion bird mirror in his hand, as he looked in the direction the river of stars was hurtling toward. His target wasn't the cannons on the battleship. Instead, his target was the place where he could detect the most powerful energy fluctuations with his divine sense. That place was most likely the core of the battleship. That's right, An Lin was planning to use the Starfire battleship's trump card to kill this battleship. Chapter 1063. The Starry Sky Formation could be said to be one of the Starfire battleship's most powerful offensive techniques. Its power was directly proportional to the pilot's power. In order to kill An Lin, the Star Dancer had elevated her cultivation base to the Return to Void pinnacle stage in a short time. The Starry Sky array diagram that she used could be said to be her strongest trump card. However, this was the ultimate killing move that she had placed her hopes on. Now, it had actually changed its direction and was fiercely sweeping towards her. It was not attacking the battleship that she was piloting. Instead, it was attacking where she was. Within a golden energy crystal, a pink-tailed mermaid's eyes widened with shock and horror. How could this be? He's only a soul formation stage cultivator. How does he know where I am? The Star Dancer's expression shifted drastically, and she was no longer able to maintain her composure. She hurriedly activated a defensive enchantment barrier. However, how could a commander without any help and a hastily constructed defense withstand the attack of the Starry Sky Formation? A crisp crack erupted, and the barrier was broken. The river of stars swept through the barrier with unstoppable force before crashing into the golden energy crystal. Boom! Energy erupted forth, and the entire battleship tremored violently as the blue light around it gradually dimmed. Lan Xiaoni's eyes were tightly shut, and she was prepared to be crushed by An Lin. However, she discovered that An Lin was standing before her completely unscathed, as if he were an immovable divine mountain. He can even reflect such a terrifying spell technique? So powerful. Lan Xiaoni opened her eyes and stared blankly at the scenes unfolding before her eyes as she exclaimed in amazement. A faint smile appeared on Enlin's face. You find a place to hide first, I'll be back soon. Wings of wind spread open on the man's back as he spoke, and a torrent of water erupted as he hurtled toward the center of the explosion at an extremely fast speed. Enlin made his way through the passageway of destruction, and after arriving at the center of the explosion, he slashed his evil-slaying sword forward, upon which a powerful sword intent sliced through the violent turbulence. He heaved a long sigh of relief at the sight of the shattered golden crystals on the ground. I made the right bet. This is the core of the battleship after all. I was operating such a massive battleship on my own, but I still ended up exposing myself. A relieved smile appeared on Enlin's face. If the core was more hidden, his situation would be several times more dangerous than before. But where did the Star Dancer go? Was she blasted into smithereens? Enlin looked around for traces of the mermaid, but he couldn't find a single fish scale. He picked up the golden energy crystal fragments from the ground. These things had a very high energy density, so they should be of some use. Enlin searched the surroundings carefully, and finally found a deep sea blue essence wood sculpture under one of the gravel. This statue was only around the size of a palm, and it bore a strong resemblance to the Star Dancer. It had a cold and haughty expression on its face, and it held a pair of folding fans in its hands. Not only were their appearances similar, but even their residual auras were very similar. Enlin, I was almost killed by a wooden sculpture. Little brother Lan, come here quickly! Enlin shouted. Lan Xiaoni immediately flew toward Enlin upon hearing this. What is it, big boss Enlin? What's the deal with this wooden sculpture? Enlin tossed the wooden sculpture to Lan Xiaoni. Lan Xiaoni caught the wooden sculpture with a blank expression, and her eyes gradually lit up. Wow! What a beautiful wooden sculpture! It looks so much like Senior Star Dancer. Is this a present for me? The mermaid princess held the wooden sculpture with a blissful smile on her face. Enlin, I'm asking you to analyze if this thing has anything to do with the Star Dancer. Enlin grumbled. Lan Xiaoni came to her senses, and a blush appeared on her face as she turned toward the wooden sculpture of the Star Dancer. After a while, she said, this wooden sculpture was constructed from the divine wood of the Spirit Fish Clan's Hongmeng sacrificial altar. It looks like it's a vessel for her residual power. The residual power of the Star Dancer has been dispersed by you, so this sculpture has naturally lost its purpose. Enlin faltered slightly upon hearing this before a hint of elation and incredulity appeared on his face. So that means I've already defeated that Spirit Fish Clan mighty figure? From the current situation, that appears to be the case. Lan Xiaoni nodded. Enlin nodded with a slightly wistful expression. His victory was far too simple and brutal, and he was struggling to accept it. He had thought that he would be able to battle the battleship Maiden for another 300 rounds. Enlin thought for a moment before swallowing another high-rank blood spirit pill in a fit of excitement. Wait, I have another question. A panicked expression suddenly appeared on Enlin's face. Lan Xiaoni looked at him. The Star Dancer is a top-rate mighty figure of the Spirit Fish Clan as well as the controller of the Starfire battleship, so she can be considered the final boss of this world, right? Enlin spoke in a slow voice. Of course. Lan Xiaoni nodded with a confused expression. So what are you trying to say? Enlin's brows furrowed tightly. According to the rules of the Trial Worlds, aren't we supposed to be teleported out after we destroy the final boss? Then, Lan Xiaoni's mouth gaped open, and her hands trembled with fright, causing the wooden carving to almost fall to the ground. We can't go back? Enlin heaved a forlorn sigh. There are only two possibilities. The first is that we still have a final boss to fight, and the second is that Tianqinji and Shi Haizi have shamelessly changed the rules of the trial. Both of them knew that the first possibility was almost impossible. The Star Dancer controlling the Starfire battleship was already the limit of what this world could handle. Tianqinji had said that she was going to use the power of this world to kill them, but even if she couldn't kill them, She could use this world to trap them forever and suffocate them to death. Lin and Lan Xiaoni were both struck by despair. Lan Xiaoni couldn't help but let loose a torrent of abuse. Not only did they use their power to set up the hellish difficulty trial, but they even changed the rules of being teleported back after killing the enemy. Are they that shameless? They're a disgrace to the High Priestess. They said we broke the rules, but they're breaking their own rules. Why aren't they saying anything? This is a blatant double standard. They're just trash. Stinky sea urchins. Useless sea cucumbers. She didn't care about her own position anymore as she unleashed a torrent of abuse. She didn't forget to smash the wooden carving viciously into the ground as she spoke. Bam! A loud shattering sound erupted. The wooden carving had been smashed into smithereens by the enraged Lan Xiaoni. A golden key then appeared before Lin and Lan Xiaoni. Lin was astonished. A new item for smashing a wooden carving? Lan Xiaoni picked up the shiny golden key with a confused expression. What is this again? Lin caught the key with an excited expression. No **T. This must be the key to open the shipwreck treasure vault. One Piece, it's mine. Lan Xiaoni. Chapter 1064. Lan Xiaoni stared at the excited Lin with a dumbstruck expression on her face. Lin didn't waste any more time with words. In any case, he wouldn't be able to tell what was going on. Divine inspection technique. Information regarding the golden key began to appear in his mind. One golden key. The key that can open the captain's core cabin. Lin's expression faltered upon hearing this. The key to the captain's core cabin? Wasn't the captain the star dancer? He had thought that this was a key to a treasure trove, but he was told that this was the key to the star dancer's boudoir? Lin was very angry. He felt like his dreams had been shattered. The star dancer's boudoir was useless to him. He was a man who was constantly advancing in pursuit of his dreams and treasures. How could he waste time on something as boring as this? This key was completely useless to him. Lin immediately turned to leave. Big Boss Lin, where are we going now? Lan Xiaoni immediately followed along. Lin replied with a solemn expression, to the captain's core cabin. Theoretically speaking, the battleship's control room and the captain's core cabin weren't too far apart. This was the core area of the battleship. They didn't have a specific direction anyway, so they could only wander around aimlessly. Thankfully, this battleship had been in disrepair for many years, so even though there was no energy to maintain normal operations, most of the doors could still be opened by Lan Xiaoni with her bloodline power. That's right, the Starfire battleship acknowledged the descendants of the Spirit Fish clan even though it was ownerless. Lan Xiaoni felt a sense of accomplishment upon seeing that even Big Boss Lin was relying on her at a time like this. They passed through over 100 gates constructed from special alloys before finally arriving at a very special gate. The gate was semicircular, and it looked like a black curtain of stars, striking one with the feeling that they were about to sink into the curtain of stars. What delighted Lin the most was that there was a row of peculiar ancient text at the top of the gate, as well as 2 fans. He didn't understand ancient text, but he knew what fans were. Those were the Star Dancer's fans. Could this be the Star Dancer's boudoir? Lin was extremely excited. Lan Xiaoni rolled her eyes at Lin before turning to the ancient text and nodding. That should be the case. The ancient text of the Spirit Fish clan probably represents the astrologer who dances in the starry sky. As she spoke, she placed her hands in front of the door as usual, and the power of her bloodline surged out. In the end, the tried-and-true method of opening the door didn't work. Lan Xiaoni was a little embarrassed. A smug smile appeared on Lin's face. A door that even you can't open must require a very high level of authority. Looks like this is the Star Dancer's core cabin. At times like this, we still have to rely on this thing. He took out the golden key and inserted it into the gap next to the door. The door opened, but the way it opened was a little peculiar. A gargantuan mouth suddenly extended from the screen of stars before swallowing Enlin and Lan Xiaoni. Enlin was shocked. Lan Xiaoni screamed. The two of them didn't even get a chance to unleash their emotions before they crashed heavily to the ground. Enlin raised his head and was greeted by the sight of an extremely antiquated house. There was a blue stone floor, a red carved table, and a painting on the wall. Outside the carved wooden windows, a vast expanse of starry sky could be seen. There seemed to be a figure sitting on the bed that was surrounded by a light blue curtain. Enlin and Lan Xiaoni's nerves tightened at the same time. "Don't do anything, let me do it," Enlin spoke with excitement. He pulled out his evil-slaying sword and sliced through the blue curtain. As the curtain slowly drifted down, a beautiful woman sat silently on the edge of the bed. Her eyes were closed, and there was no trace of vitality in her as her fishtail dangled to the ground. In comparison to death, she looked more like a beautiful woman taking a nap. Time had passed for countless years, but it didn't leave a single mark on her body. Is this the star dancer's body? She looks even more beautiful than when she was fighting. Enlin couldn't help but praise. Lan Xiaoni reminded him with a serious expression, "Big Boss Enlin, did you come here to admire a corpse? Don't forget what you're here for." "I'm here for what I'm here for. Look at this star dancer. She died in a sitting position, and she looks so peaceful too. This is so strange. Isn't this worthy of our research?" Enlin retorted. Lan Xiaoni pouted angrily as she knew she couldn't win an argument against him. Enlin made his way over to the star dancer's body and carefully inspected it. He couldn't help but poke a finger at the star dancer's delicate cheek to find that it was a little cold, but not hard. Her body is very intact. It looks like she was inflicted with some kind of extremely powerful curse technique, which is why she died. Enlin analyzed. Low-level curses targeted the body, high-level curses targeted the consciousness, and top-level curses targeted karma and fate. For example, I can curse you to be unlucky for the rest of your life. This is actually a top-level curse technique that can affect the fate of a living being. It's untraceable and extremely difficult to dispel. Enlin couldn't tell how the star dancer had died, so he could only attribute her death to a curse technique. To be able to curse a mighty figure at the Return to Void Pinnacle stage, the culprit must be at least at the Dao integration stage, right? Lan Xiaoni was a little nervous. Enlin nodded. The Star Dancer also has the Starfire battleship, so normal Dao integration stage mighty figures might not be able to do anything to her. The culprit must be a powerful being of the Dao integration stage at the very least. It's just that, if they really wanted to kill the Star Dancer, wouldn't it be much easier for them to just fight her? Look at the situation now. The curse technique wasn't completely successful. The Star Dancer was still able to split up a portion of her power to stay behind on the battleship and bully us with glee. Enlin was clearly a little resentful toward this. Lan Xiaoni suddenly had a bold thought in response to Enlin's question. It's not impossible. If the culprit didn't even take the Star Dancer seriously, then wouldn't it make sense that they could just throw a curse technique at her? Enlin. Then how bad *SS would they have to be? Probably as bad *SS as Big Boss Enlin, who's at the Return to Void stage. Lan Xiaoni speculated with a serious expression. What kind of *T are you talking about? Enlin was quite elated. He was very pleased that his underling had a good eye for detail. As for the living being that had killed the Star Dancer, they didn't know who it was, but they had a feeling that it wasn't the ancient heavenly fiend Celestial. If the ancient heavenly fiend Celestial really was that bad *SS, then it wouldn't have been slain by the two high priests. Enlin searched the Star Dancer's body again to find that it was cold and soft. That wasn't the point. He just wanted to see if there were any treasures. It was a pity that this mighty figure at the Return to Void Pinnacle stage didn't have a single treasure on her. In the end, Lan Xiaoni stowed the Star Dancer's body into her storage ring. Even though they were enemies, The Star Dancer was a top-rate mighty figure of the Spirit Fish clan who had sacrificed herself to protect the clan. If she could return to the Sea Heart Palace, she was going to give this mighty figure a proper burial. The two of them refused to give up, and they continued to rummage through the room, feeling like there was something good waiting for them. They had finally found the golden key, so they couldn't just end up with a beautiful corpse, right? That was way too tragic. After a long and arduous search, the two of them finally found a rather special item. This was the Star Dancer's Voyage Diary. Chapter 1065. This was a voyage diary with a black cover and an extremely long number of pages. Unlin flipped open the diary with excitement on his face, and he was immediately dumbstruck by the contents within. What the hell is this thing? The characters crawled like earthworms, but he couldn't understand a single word. It's the ancient language of the Spirit Fish clan. Leave it to me. Lan Xiaoni patted her voluptuous chest with a smug expression. As the daughter of a top-rate immortal of the Spirit Fish clan, she was extremely knowledgeable about the history and culture of the Spirit Fish clan, so an ancient language wasn't a problem for her. Unlin finally recalled that these characters were very similar to the characters on the top of the gate. Lan Xiaoni began to translate for Unlin in the Tai Chu language as she read through the diary. The good thing about this diary was that it could only record major events on the day that took place. For some reason, Unlin suddenly thought of Kong Zuexiang's diary. She was a girl who would record everything she ate on that day. The diary was like the only friend she could communicate with, and it was also the proof of her existence in this world. The Star Dancer's diary was even more spectacular. It was a record of what enemies she had defeated on that day and where she had conquered the next day, and it appeared to be extremely domineering and invincible. Not only could she easily kill Return to Void stage mighty figures, but she could also force Dao Integration stage super mighty figures to flee in a direct confrontation. She was the epitome of an invincible little tyrant. The Starfire battleship really was very powerful, but it burned a lot of money, so normal people couldn't afford it. The rest of the diary was filled with the history of these battles, and Lan Xiaoni patiently described them to Unlin with great interest. After a long time, most of the diary had been flipped through, and what they were most concerned about finally took place. The ancient heavenly fiend Celestial had appeared. This monster that seemed to have appeared out of thin air wreaked havoc in the West Sea. Countless peculiar sea monsters also suddenly appeared, and they obeyed the ancient heavenly fiend Celestial's command to attack all living beings in the sea. Thus, an earth-shattering battle erupted. The ancient heavenly fiend Celestial and its subordinates were far more powerful than the Spirit Fish clan had anticipated, and the Spirit Fish clan was immediately forced into a disadvantageous position. However, the Spirit Fish clan wasn't always on the receiving end. At some point in time, the Spirit Fish clan decided to use their most powerful weapon, the Starfire battleship. One had to admit that the Starfire battleship was extremely powerful. It had once suppressed the ancient heavenly fiend Celestial for a while, with the help of the clan leader and the high priestess. In the diary, the Star Dancer described the ancient heavenly fiend Celestial as follows. The ancient heavenly fiend Celestial has the most terrifying control over the power of the ocean that I've ever seen. Even though I didn't want to admit it, its control over the power of the ocean had indeed surpassed that of any living creature I had ever seen. Even High Priest Shihaizi couldn't compare to it. It seemed to be the master of this sea. Shihaizi was the most powerful being in the Spirit Fish clan at the time, but he was forced to the point where he didn't dare to use the power of the ocean. Apparently, he would be controlled by the ancient heavenly fiend Celestial if he used the power of the ocean. Unlin's mouth twitched when he heard this. Even though he wasn't there, he could empathize with Shihaizi's awkwardness. As such, the Spirit Fish clan mighty figures could only use other types of powers to battle the ancient heavenly fiend Celestial. The Starfire battleship, which was adept at using star power, had become the main force of this battle. During one battle, They had even fought their way into the ancient heavenly Fien Celestial's lair. At the bottom of the ocean, there was a massive blue spatial hole, from which a steady stream of strange creatures surged out. It was quite clear that the ancient heavenly Fiend Celestial had come from that spatial hole. Shihizi, you guys hold off the ancient heavenly Fiend Celestial for now. I'll go and destroy its lair, the pink-tailed mermaid said decisively. All right, but you have to be careful and come back as soon as possible. High Priest Shihizi roared as he and the Spirit Fish clan leader tried their best to hold off the ancient heavenly Fiend Celestial. The Star Dancer had been through countless battles, and her personality was extremely ruthless and capable. She loved having her allies hold off the enemy while she went to raid the enemy's lair. She wanted to see if the ancient heavenly Fiend Celestial would scram back to that world after blowing up its lair. The Starfire battleship launched a Starfire annihilation cannon into the blue spatial hole. Tens of thousands of strange sea mutant beasts within and without the blue spatial hole were instantly engulfed by the cannon blast, and their bodies were completely annihilated. The Starfire battleship flew into the blue spatial hole just like that. After entering the blue spatial hole, the Star Dancer heard the ancient heavenly Fien Celestial's triumphant laughter. Ha ha! Do you really think I'll be held off by you guys so easily? Stupid fish, once you go in, you will stay there forever. These were the last words she heard from the ancient heavenly Fiend Celestial. The indestructible spatial passageway between the two worlds suddenly shrank and disappeared. The Starfire battleship lost contact with the outside world. It was as if its spatial coordinates with the Tai Chu continent had been completely erased, and it had lost all sense of direction. All of the tens of thousands of operators and soldiers on the battleship instantly fell into a state of panic. Anyone who found out that they couldn't find their way home would be shaken violently. The Star Dancer stepped forward at this moment and changed the subject. She claimed that they had finally managed to enter the ancient heavenly Fien Celestial's lair, so it would be a waste if they didn't destroy its lair. If they had anything to say, they could do that after destroying its lair. All of the soldiers on the Starfire battleship were extremely exceptional soldiers, so this was exactly what they wanted to hear. If they couldn't find their way home, then they would destroy the enemy's lair first. The world within the blue spatial hole was also an underwater world. There were countless strange creatures here. The Starfire battleship slaughtered everything in its path. Blood stained the seawater red, and countless living beings perished to the Starfire battleship's cannons. A battleship with the combat prowess of a Tao integration stage super mighty figure was like a tiger in a flock of sheep, and it could slaughter anyone it saw without any pressure. Everything seemed to be going very smoothly. Until that day, Lan Xiaoni noticed that the Star Dancer's handwriting was a little different when she wrote this diary entry. She seemed to be trembling. On this day we saw an extremely extravagant underwater palace. There's no mistaking it. That must be the ancient heavenly Fien Celestial's home. That was what the Star Dancer was thinking. She couldn't even be bothered to greet the rest of the soldiers and immediately issued a command to unleash a massive mushroom cloud upon the underwater palace. The terrifying cannon blast instantly razed the palace to the ground. All of the soldiers on the battleship erupted into raucous cheers. All of them were feeling extremely elated. All of a sudden, an extremely mighty being appeared above the mushroom cloud. It was impossible to see its appearance. However, all of the members of the Starfire battleship were struck by the urge to kneel and worship it. This was not just a transcendence in cultivation base, it was more like a transcendence in the hierarchy of life. If there was a true God in this world, then this God that I'm looking at should be one. However, that God doesn't seem to welcome us. It only said one thing to us: you don't belong here, and you can't go back, so all of you can disappear. Thus, all of the members of the Starfire battleship began to disappear. They didn't cry out in pain. Instead, their bodies gradually became transparent and non-existent. No matter how much they struggled, it was all to no avail. In less than a minute, tens of thousands of their comrades had all disappeared, along with all traces of life. I was the only one left. I had never thought that I would see a being that could kill all living beings with just a few words. This wasn't power. There was no way that pure power could achieve this. This was the power that only a true God could wield. For the first time, I experienced fear. Chapter 1066. But why didn't I disappear? Had I been ignored by God? The Star Dancer stared blankly at the blue figure outside the battleship. Soon, she rejected her previous thoughts. She discovered that she was also dying, and her vitality was slowly fading away. The Star Dancer's heart jolted with shock. She didn't even know what kind of power was robbing her of her vitality. It was as if she shouldn't be living, and death was the only way to go. Dead. They're all going to die, all of the living beings here were going to die just because of a single sentence from it. The entire Starfire battleship had been annihilated in the blink of an eye. The crushing sense of despair and shock forced the Star Dancer to calm down as she carefully analyzed her current situation. Even though she hadn't disappeared, she was dying in a different way. She was the only one who had grasped the power of the divine Tao among the tens of thousands of soldiers on this battleship. So, living beings who had attained the power of the divine Tao would be able to defend themselves against that being's attacks to a certain extent? Even though she was only dying in a different way, the Star Dancer immediately made a decision. The being above the mushroom cloud was not something she could face head-on. The only thing she could do now was to minimize her presence and find a chance to return to the West Sea. At the very least, she had to get the Starfire battleship back to the West Sea. Her chances were very slim, but this was the only thing she could do. The Star Dancer, who dared to oppose even Tao integration stage mighty figures, felt like an ant in that instant. This battleship can go down as well. A voice that seemed to be quite far away yet also seemed to strike directly at her consciousness suddenly sounded. Before the Star Dancer had a chance to react, a peerlessly sharp blue blade projection fell from the sky and almost sliced the entire battleship in half. An explosive screech erupted throughout the entire ocean. The battleship cracked open and wailed with anguish before plummeting into the deep-sea continent. The Star Dancer's expression was one of despair. The battleship's propulsion system had been sliced apart with extreme precision. How could there be such a power? How could there be such a being? Who was it? Boom. The Starfire battleship crashed into the deep-sea continent, sweeping up a massive sandstorm. The Star Dancer's entire body was trembling, but she was unable to do anything. The blue figure gradually disappeared, as if it had never appeared in the first place. However, the Star Dancer knew that her words would sink the Starfire battleship to the bottom of the ocean forever. The Star Dancer suddenly discovered that there was only one thing she could do, and that was to wait for death. His life force was still fading away, and his power of the divine Tao was also growing weaker and weaker. At this rate, he might not even last a day. She had thought of many unexpected situations, but she had never imagined that things would turn out like this. She had inexplicably died. Forget it, I'll record everything in my nautical diary. At the very least, one day in the future, the descendants of the Spirit Fish clan would learn about everything that had happened here. Although all of this was so bizarre that it was like a dream. Prior to her death, the Star Dancer had activated the Starfire battleship's spatial locator waves to their maximum output and used a mystic technique to inject all of her remaining power into the Hong Meng Divine Wood. After doing all this, she closed the diary and sat quietly at the head of the bed. She recalled her past life and waited for her final death. The diary ended here. Lin and Lan Xiaoni both fell silent. Big Boss Lin, what do you think the blue figure that killed the Star Dancer was? Lan Xiaoni was the first to break the silence. It should be a god of creation stage mighty figure like Nuwa, the three pure ones, and Pangu, right? Lin's brows furrowed. Lan Xiaoni shook her head in objection. That's not all. I've seen Nuwa and Cyril in battle. Even a god of creation stage mighty figure above the Tao integration stage wouldn't be able to decide the fate of all the living beings on the Starfire battleship with a single word. Don't forget, Big Boss and Lin, the Starfire battleship possesses power comparable to a Tao integration stage super mighty figure. That god is at least comparable to a Tao integration stage mighty figure, Big Boss and Lin. And Lin's expression darkened upon hearing this. Please don't brag. I feel like I'm going to explode from your bullsh *t. Also, when did I become a unit of measurement? And Lin added with a resigned expression. Lan Xiaoni stuck out her tongue with a seductive smile. Wouldn't that make Big Boss and Lin more immersive? Immersive my *s. It's very strange. And Lin retorted. He thought to himself for a moment before heaving a forlorn sigh. The more you know, the more insecure you become. To think that a mighty figure like the Star Dancer would die for no apparent reason. What if I encountered a god like that and it was jealous of my handsome looks and told me that I should disappear from this world? What would I do then? Lan Xiaoni. It wasn't unreasonable to be concerned, but wasn't there a problem with this reasoning? Lan Xiaoni was still hesitating about whether she should tell Lin the truth about his handsome looks when a look of horror suddenly appeared on Lin's face. Crap! Lan Xiaoni turned to him with a confused expression. What is it? The diary says that the Starfire battleship fell on a continent at the bottom of the ocean. As for us, we also discovered the Starfire battleship in an unfamiliar underwater world. Could this place be? Lin spoke with a tense expression. This? Lan Xiaoni's eyes widened in shock. An extremely terrifying thought appeared in both of their minds at the same time. Lin and Lan Xiaoni drew a sharp intake of breath in unison. The place where the Starfire battleship had fallen, the lair of the ancient heavenly fiend celestial, the place where the mysterious being had appeared. Lin had just joked about how he would feel extremely insecure if he encountered a god like that. Now, it was very likely that the place they were in was where that mysterious god was. Have we fallen into a wolf's den? Lan Xiaoni trembled uncontrollably like a frightened little lamb. Lin took a deep breath before speaking in a calm voice. Don't panic. After careful analysis, there are actually a lot of uncertainties here. This deep ocean may not be that terrifying place. Think about it, this place was referred to as the Heavenly Turtle Seabed Purgatory by Tianqinji, and it clearly has something to do with the Heavenly Turtle tribe. How could it be that alternate world? Besides, even if that alternate world has become the trial world of the High Priestess tomb, doesn't that mean that the two High Priestesses have already conquered this world? It's very likely that the mysterious being is no longer here. This place has completely become the trial field of the fallen god tomb. Lin's explanation was so convincing that even he was convinced. Lan Xiaoni then made a critical conjecture. Then what if Tianqinji and Shihaizi didn't discover the Star Dancer's nautical diary? Lin was dumbstruck. One had to realize that the Star Dancer's divine intent wasn't an independent life form and didn't have a complete memory. It was very likely that she had been used by the High Priestesses as a trial boss. The wooden statue would only appear when the residual power of the Star Dancer's body had completely disappeared. In other words, the High Priestesses didn't know about the wooden statue, they didn't know about the golden key, they couldn't enter the Star Dancer's room, and they didn't see the nautical diary. It was very likely that they didn't know anything about this world. It was just that for some reason, he had treated this place as an ordinary mystic realm to play around with. No, this is the place where the Starfire battleship crashed. There's no way that the two High Priestesses would treat this world as a normal one. Lin suddenly realized that something was amiss. Lan Xiaoni said, I remember now. The fallen god seabed tomb was constructed on the seabed where the ancient heavenly fiend celestial appeared. There must be a reason behind this. It's very likely that we were able to pass through the tomb to this alternate world. Lin's brows furrowed. If this really is the alternate world where the ancient heavenly fiend Celestial resides, then didn't the diary say that opening a passageway between the two worlds would be extremely difficult? How could we have been teleported here by Tianqinji? Unless there are other mighty figures in this world helping us. Cold sweat began to appear on Lan Xiaoni's forehead. A peculiar silence ensued. The two mighty figures were able to disregard the dangers of this place and open up a passageway between the two worlds. After a ferocious analysis, a thought began to well up in Enlin and Lan Xiaoni's hearts. Could it be that the two high priestesses and that mysterious being were involved in some kind of shady deal? Chapter 1067. This conjecture was actually quite valid. Otherwise, it really couldn't explain the strange behavior of the two high priests. The secret regarding the fate of the two tribes should also have something to do with a shady deal between the high priest and a certain powerful being of this world, Enlin speculated. A thought suddenly occurred to him, and he brought out the photographic crystal from his storage ring. Underling Lan, this is the picture of Tianqinji's turtle shell that I took. What is the secret regarding the two tribes written on it? Lan Xiaoni took a glance at it before shaking her head with a hint of disappointment. I've seen this type of special ancient text before, but I can only decipher it with reference to the starry sky of the West Sea. Enlin's expression darkened upon hearing this. Can't you just write down the secret? Why do you have to make it so complicated? I really don't understand what's the point of having to look at the stars to decipher something. It's very secretive, and it looks very powerful and gives off a sense of superiority, Lan Xiaoni replied with an honest expression. Enlin had nothing to say to Lan Xiaoni's honesty. The two of them had fallen into a predicament again. Aside from the addition of a terrifying enemy, they didn't seem to have gained anything else. That's right, if they couldn't leave this accursed place, everything would be for naught. The two of them swept through the Star Dancer's room again. The results were very disappointing. They didn't find any useful information or items. Big Boss Enlin, what do we do now? Lan Xiaoni turned to Enlin for help with a hint of fear and anticipation in her eyes. Enlin paused for a moment before replying. Seeing as the high priests won't open a path for us, we have one last option. What is it? Lan Xiaoni asked. Find that powerful being of this world, and get him to open a passageway for us. Enlin replied with a serious expression. Lan Xiaoni. The mermaid princess stared at Enlin with astonishment on her face, and there seemed to be tears shimmering in her eyes. Enlin stared blankly at his underling, who was about to burst into tears again, and before he had a chance to ask why, she began to sob again. Wah! I thought that Big Boss Enlin would be my last resort in a dire situation, but who would have thought that Big Boss would go crazy before I did? Have you already broken down? I can't believe I'm seeking death. Lan Xiaoni sobbed with despair as she wiped away her tears. Enlin's mouth twitched. That mysterious being had sunk the Starfire battleship with just a few words before slaughtering tens of thousands of Spirit Fish Clan powerful beings with his mouth alone. It was no wonder that Lan Xiaoni would think this way if Enlin wanted to meet such a killer. Actually, Enlin had his own considerations for this matter. If that mysterious existence could really reach some kind of deal with the two high priests, then it proved that it was not completely unable to communicate, and there was still room for negotiation. Even though Enlin was only an ordinary soul formation stage cultivator, he had many trump cards. The vermilion bird mirror, the chaotic alloy brick, the dragon tribe mighty figure in his ring, the flaming vermilion bird in his sea of vital energy, and his crazy system. At the critical moment, he couldn't possibly not use any of them, right? Of course, this was a plan that would not be used until the last moment. Alright, don't cry. In any case, let's continue our search on the Starfire battleship and see if there are any other clues. Enlin heaved a forlorn sigh. Lan Xiaoni had no objections, and she left the Star Dancer's cabin before continuing to act as the bloodline key. She entered one room after another on the battleship. The Starfire battleship was extremely massive, and it would definitely take over a year to search through all of the rooms. Thankfully, they had found the surveillance room and the battleship map. That made things easier as they only had to search the key areas of the battleship. The search was complete after a few days. Aside from some rare forging materials and energy vessels, they didn't find anything else. To be honest, even if 100 million spirit stones were placed in front of Enlin right now, he wouldn't be able to bring himself to pick them up. They were going to die here, so what was the point of all this money? The Star Dancer was the captain of the battleship, yet she couldn't even find a way out of this battleship, so how were they going to find a way out of here? Enlin and Lan Xiaoni slumped onto the deck of the battleship with expressions of despair on their faces. There's only one way left. Enlin gritted his teeth. No, there's another way. Lan Xiaoni refused to give up hope. What is it? We can cultivate here in secret, and after progressing to the return to void stage, we might be able to sense the spatial coordinates of the West Sea and escape from this *TTY place. Lan Xiaoni spoke with conviction. Enlin, why don't you just tell me to beat the crap out of that mysterious mighty figure after I progress to the Tao integration stage or the God of creation stage? Lan Xiaoni's eyes lit up. That's a great idea. I think Starfish. Starfish my *S. Enlin immediately gave her a vicious slap on the head. He didn't want to waste any more time, and he turned to Lan Xiaoni. We can't even tear open a spatial passageway with our power, let alone a passageway whose coordinates are unknown. I'm going to find that mighty figure, so it's up to you whether you want to come with me or not. Enlin turned to leave as he spoke. Lan Xiaoni clenched her fists, and her shoulders trembled slightly, as if she had fallen into a dilemma. After a few seconds, she took a deep breath before following Enlin with a determined expression. So be it. If I die, I die. Big Boss Enlin, wait for me. Even though she knew that Enlin was basically committing suicide, and she was terrified to death, she still couldn't help but follow along. Hey, underling Lan, don't pull on my sleeve. I'm scared. Enlin rolled his eyes before flying out of the battleship atop his brick. Their first stop was to search for the palace that had been destroyed. According to the description in the diary, the place where the blue figure appeared was right above the mushroom cloud. To be honest, Enlin was starting to suspect that the palace was that mighty figure's home. That was why it had appeared as soon as the Starfire battleship blew up its home before destroying the entire Starfire battleship in a fit of rage. After all, its home had been razed to the ground, so it naturally had to retaliate. As a mighty figure, it couldn't just say that it was attacking its juniors in order to maintain its grandeur, so it had to come up with some excuse like, "You don't belong to this world," before attacking, my god. Thinking about it that way, it made a lot of sense. Enlin swallowed silently. There was a hint of hope in his nervousness. If it really was as he had guessed, then that mighty figure seemed to be more humane and easier to negotiate with? With these questions in mind, he searched the vast and boundless seabed for close to a day before finally discovering a place that appeared to have been blasted apart by a massive shockwave. However, at the center of the explosion, there was no massive crater. Instead, a brand new palace. Chapter 1068. A brand new palace had appeared in this place that had once been a pile of rubble. Enlin and Lan Xiaoni both realized what this entailed. Their hearts began to race as they stared at the underwater palace with nervous expressions. The palace was extremely massive with a width of over a kilometer. The main color scheme was white with white walls and red windows. The top of the palace shone with a faint luster in the inky black sea, as if it were a bright pearl in the darkness. They had only come here to try their luck, but they didn't think that they would discover a palace within the rubble of an explosion. Did that mysterious being have obsessive-compulsive disorder? Why did he have to build the palace at the site of the explosion? Couldn't he have chosen a different location? Enlin didn't dare to say anything even though he was grumbling internally. Big Boss Enlin, are you really going? Lan Xiaoni's voice trembled. Lin nodded with a solemn expression. That's right. Don't worry, I still have many trump cards, so we have a very good chance of winning. Lan Xiaoni didn't know where Lin's confidence was coming from, but she could only nod with difficulty. She was trying to brainwash herself over and over again, reminding herself that Big Boss Lin was invincible in order to bolster her courage. The two of them began to carefully approach the palace. Lin tried to use his divine sense to probe the interior of the palace, only to be blocked by an invisible barrier. No matter how much his consciousness was amplified, he was unable to penetrate the outer wall of the palace. This palace really was something else. Lin made his way over to the white gate and was just about to push it open when his hand faltered in midair. Lan Xiaoni was ecstatic to think that he was going to change his mind. Big Boss Lin, we have plenty of time. Let's go back and think about it. There must be another way. Lin pulled out the Gundams from his storage ring. Go, cannon fodder Gundams. Lan Xiaoni. That's right, Lin didn't dare to take the risk himself, so he sent the Gundams to scout ahead. Gundams 1 and 2 were quite weak, so this was the only job they could do. Lin and Lan Xiaoni silently retreated into the distance. They knew that in the face of a mighty figure like this, putting some distance between them was useless. The Gundams diligently pushed open the gate. Following a loud boom sound, the door was pushed open slowly. Gundam 1 and Gundam 2 were just about to scan the interior of the ship. Enemy! A faintly discernible voice suddenly sounded from within the palace. The two Gundams suddenly shuddered violently. Then, their super-alloy bodies began to disintegrate at a speed visible to the naked eye. Ka. Bang! Gundam 1 and Gundam 2 exploded. It wasn't an ordinary explosion. Instead, his entire body had exploded into tiny particles and was eventually annihilated in the deep sea. Not even a hair was left behind. Lin and Lan Xiaoni both drew a sharp intake of breath upon seeing this. What happened just now? There were no energy fluctuations at all. Just a single sentence was enough to make the two Gundams explode? What he had heard was far less shocking than seeing it with his own eyes. Lin, who was originally very confident, now felt an itch in his legs. Bah! It was a battle between two forces. Lan Xiaoni instinctively hid behind Lin. She was so scared. Just how powerful was this enemy to be able to unleash such a powerful attack? Furthermore, it had said, enemy. Even when the Starfire battleship had blasted its home, it hadn't referred to the enemy as enemy. But now, it was referring to the Gundams as enemies? Cold sweat poured down Lin's face as a sense of horror welled up in his heart. He felt like he was in an even more dire situation than the people on the Starfire battleship. Regardless of whether it was the enemy's power or its attitude, Lin was feeling extremely pressured. If the attack could really be detected, then the chaotic alloy brick and vermilion bird mirror would be able to defend against it. But if the two Gundams exploded from a single sentence, how was he supposed to defend against that? Wait, say a single sentence? A thought suddenly occurred to Lin. Could it be that the enemy's attack had something to do with sound? A thought suddenly occurred to Lin. Regardless of whether it was the Starfire battleship or the two Gundams, the enemy always had to say a single sentence before the other party reacted. When the two Gundams pushed open the door, they were clearly just weaklings who could be killed without even saying a single sentence. So why did it have to say that they were enemies? They were just robots, so why did it have to say a single sentence? Why did it have to say a single sentence? Could it be that the enemy liked to talk? That wasn't entirely impossible. Just as these thoughts were racing through Lin's mind, a soft and gentle voice sounded from behind him. Big Boss Lin, why are you still standing there? That door is closing on its own. Lin abruptly raised his head to discover that the door that had just been opened was slowly closing. Should he continue onward, or should he go back and plan for the long haul? Going back and planning for the long haul was just bullsh*t. He was just hiding and waiting for his death. F*ck it all. A ferocious expression appeared on Lin's face, and he was just about to step forward when a figure suddenly appeared before him, blocking his path. This was a dreamy blue figure, and it was impossible to see its shape or size. It was as if it had become one with the entire ocean, or as if it were heaven and earth itself. An indescribable feeling welled up in Lin's heart. He stood rooted to the spot and stared blankly at the scenes unfolding before his eyes, not doing anything. It was as if Lan Xiaoni had seen the paramount god between heaven and earth, and her fishtail gave out as she slumped to the ground and hung her head, unable to even muster up the courage to look directly at it. Lin knew that this was the mysterious enemy that had destroyed the Starfire battleship with just 2 sentences and killed the 2 Gundams with a single sentence. Who said they had to go find the enemy? They were right next to the palace, so the enemy could come and find them in person. Lin had no choice but to muster up his courage. Calm down, senior. We bear no ill will toward you, so let's talk things over. He chose to explain the situation first as he was afraid that the enemy would say things like destroy and enemies first. The blue figure was extremely dreamy and ethereal, and it was impossible to tell whether it was round or square, let alone its facial features. However, Lin could sense that the blue figure seemed to be focusing its attention on him. Gulp. Lin swallowed in silence. He looked at the indistinguishable existence up ahead, and he straightened his back. He could be weak, but he couldn't lose in terms of aura. The blue figure slowly landed before materializing, and Lin's heart thumped in his chest. He didn't know what this enemy was trying to do, but he instinctively didn't dare to interrupt the blue figure's materialization process. In the end, the mysterious enemy materialized into a water humanoid with blurry facial features. At least he could see its shape and size. Lin faltered slightly upon seeing this, clearly unsure of what this action entailed. In the next instant, the water humanoid extended a hand toward Lin and cocked its head to the side. Hello. Chapter 1069. Lin and Lan Xiaoni's eyes widened in shock. What was this humanoid water creature doing? Was it expressing goodwill? Lin didn't have the guts to refuse a handshake from a powerful being, so he immediately extended a hand to shake its hand. The hand was soft and smooth to the touch, and he felt as if he were shaking hands with a piece of jelly. Lin didn't dare to shake it for too long, and he immediately withdrew his hand after expressing goodwill. In any case, this mysterious being's attitude toward him was quite good, and it was even better than what he had anticipated. To think that it would voluntarily shake his hand. Lin was feeling quite elated, but at the same time, a cautious expression appeared on his face. Senior, can you take us back to our original world? He cut straight to the chase with a respectful expression. That's right, even though he was a little flattered, he wasn't going to lose his bearings and forget what his true objective was. The humanoid water creature didn't say anything. Instead, it turned its head to look at Lin. Its round head didn't have any eyes, but Lan Xiaoni could sense that the humanoid water creature was looking at her. An indistinct voice that could shake one's heart rang out once more. You don't belong here, you should. Before the humanoid water creature had a chance to finish its sentence, Lin interjected, so we should go home. Please take us home, senior. The humanoid water creature's body rippled slightly, and its head tilted to the side as if its thoughts had been disrupted as it fell into silence. In contrast, Lin and Lan Xiaoni heaved heavy sighs of relief. What a familiar phrase. If the humanoid water creature had said, you should disappear, then Lan Xiaoni would have been screwed. Thankfully, Lin's interjection cut off the humanoid water creature's verbal barrage. Lan Xiaoni turned to Lin with gratitude in her eyes. She knew that Lin's words were extremely risky and could very well transfer the humanoid water creature's death onto her, but Lin still did it without any hesitation. Lin stared at the humanoid water creature with an extremely tense expression, fearful that it would say something terrifying again. After a moment, the humanoid water creature turned to Lin. You can't, that's right. I can't stay here. I should go back to my original world. Senior, can you help us go back? Unlin interjected again. The waterman. Unlin's heart rate sped up, and he was extremely nervous. He was afraid that the humanoid water creature would say something that would determine whether he lived or died, so he decided to continue gagging the humanoid water creature. This was the third time he had emphasized that he wanted to return to his original world. He had already said important things 3 times, so this big boss should be able to understand his thoughts, right? They only hoped that the boss was in a good mood and was a kind-hearted person who could open a hole for them. Unlin looked carefully at the water figure with a beseeching expression. The humanoid water creature's emotions seemed to have become rather disjointed, and it stood rooted to the spot in a daze. After a moment it spoke again. I want to, yes. You're going to take us out now, right? Unlin interrupted excitedly. The humanoid water creature, Lan Xiaoni. Boss Unlin's desire to live was a little too strong. Paji. Unlin's body was suddenly flattened to the ground. He only felt an extremely terrifying suppressive force sweeping over, causing him to lose all movement. It's over. Unlin's heart jolted with shock. The mysterious big boss was about to strike. Boss Unlin. Lan Xiaoni's expression shifted drastically upon seeing this, and she immediately rushed toward Unlin to face the humanoid water creature. Unlin wanted to say something to calm Lan Xiaoni down, but he discovered that all of his power had been sealed away, and he didn't even have the power to speak. He didn't even have the power to shut the humanoid water creature's mouth. This was truly a dire situation. The humanoid water creature nodded with satisfaction at the sight of Unlin sprawled to the ground before turning to Lan Xiaoni. I want to complete my agreement with those 2 juniors. It looked at Lan Xiaoni, who was still standing resolutely in front of it with a pale face. You don't belong here. You're the one those 2 juniors were referring to as the chosen one, right? Huh. Lan Xiaoni's expression faltered, and she had yet to come to her senses. Unlin. Stupid C****. Admit it. Unlin yelled at Lan Xiaoni in his heart. Lan Xiaoni's body shuddered, and she finally came to her senses before nodding instinctively. That's right, I am the chosen one. The humanoid water creature nodded. Your aptitude is also suitable. You are indeed a very good vessel. Wait, vessel? The name, Chosen One, sounded like a very powerful title, but it turned out that she was destined to be a vessel. Lan Xiaoni and Unlin were astonished again as a sense of foreboding welled up in their hearts. Lan Xiaoni was extremely remorseful. She opened her mouth and really wanted to say, I lied to you, but her rationality told her that she would die even faster if she did that. The humanoid water creature extended 2 index fingers and tapped them together before separating them again. An unknown blue object appeared at the spot where the 2 fingers had parted. It was only the size of a fist, but it was ever-changing and illusory like water. Looking at it was like looking at a boundless ocean. The humanoid water creature waved a hand, and the unknown blue object instantly fused into Lan Xiaoni's forehead. Lan Xiaoni moaned in pain as she clasped her hands over her head, and her body trembled uncontrollably as her powerful aura swept through the ocean within a radius of over 50 kilometers. Her aura climbed steadily, and it became more and more powerful. Unlin was extremely anxious and concerned upon seeing this, and he frantically tried to break free from the seal on his body, causing his body to tremble uncontrollably. No. I can't let anything happen to underling Lan. Get up, hurry up and get moving. Boom. All of a sudden, an extremely terrifying power erupted into the sky. Unlin's eyes widened as he stared at the woman in the distance. A bright blue divine light emanated from Lan Xiaoni's body, and it was gentle yet vast. Her aura was as vast and boundless as the ocean, but also as unfathomably deep as a dragon pond. Not only that, but Unlin could also sense a completely different type of power emanating from her body. It was as if she had transcended beyond this entire world. She was like a true god. Vessel, was she still Lan Xiaoni? The humanoid water creature seemed to have detected Lan Xiaoni's emotions. Lan Xiaoni turned around with a gentle smile on her face. Big boss Enlin, I'm fine. Enlin looked at the woman who was smiling at him to discover that there was a blue water droplet insignia on her snowy white forehead, from which a paramount divine power was exuding. He felt like this power was a little familiar. The humanoid water creature nodded with elation at the sight of Lan Xiaoni. Very good. Everything went very smoothly. It's time for you to carry out your duty. Go back now. Lan Xiaoni and Enlin were ecstatic to hear this. Even though the entire process had been very confusing and inexplicable. However, this mysterious being had finally decided to send them back. This was fantastic news. The humanoid water creature pointed a finger at a certain spot in the ocean, and a blue passageway between the two worlds suddenly appeared. It spoke, "Go, my chosen one. Conquer the West Sea and wipe the entire human race from the face of the Tai Chu continent." Chapter 1070. Rule over the West Sea? Wipe out the entire human race from the face of the Tai Chu continent? Enlin and Lan Xiaoni were both dumbstruck by the humanoid water creature's final sentence. This was the duty of the chosen one? This B***starred wanted Lan Xiaoni to rule over the West Sea? Wipe out the entire human race? Pfft! Enlin couldn't help but burst into laughter. Setting aside just how outrageous this request was, just Lan Xiaoni's unreliable personality alone would probably make it impossible for her to rule over the Spirit Fish clan. Perhaps the humanoid water creature had said everything it needed to say, but the restriction on Enlin's body also disappeared. Enlin abruptly stood up and pinched Lan Xiaoni's soft cheek. What are you doing?" Lan Xiaoni recoiled slightly as a blush appeared on her face. Enlin heaved a sigh of relief. "Thank God you're still the same underling, Lan." Lan Xiaoni was a little touched by this, but she maintained a cold expression. "It's time to carry out my mission. Let's go." Enlin nodded with a serious expression. "Let's go back." The most important thing now was to return to their original world. The passageway between the two worlds opened up by the humanoid water creature was their last chance to leave this accursed place. As for whether it was a blessing or a curse that Lan Xiaoni had been tasked with such an important mission, he would have to think about it after he got back. The two of them knew that there was no time to lose, and they immediately made their way toward the passageway between the two worlds. All of a sudden, the humanoid water creature appeared in front of the passageway before pointing a finger at Enlin. "You're not going to stay here?" Enlin was at a loss upon hearing this. This question was so King weird. Why would he want to stay here? He forced a smile onto his face. "Senior, I still have some matters to attend to, so I have to go back now." The humanoid water creature stared at Enlin with its eyeless eyes. The atmosphere suddenly became a little terrifying. After a short while, the humanoid water creature suddenly nodded. I understand now." "Enlin, what do you understand?" The humanoid water creature abruptly made a grabbing motion toward a certain spot in the ocean, and the entire ocean surged violently as the water surged and churned, as if the entire world were trembling. Enlin's heart jolted as he stared at the humanoid water creature with a dumbstruck expression. Soon, a blue ball of light flew over from afar before landing in the water humanoid's hand. "You have things to do, so I won't keep you. I don't have anything to give you either. This is a small boat that came here a long time ago. It looks pretty good, so I'll give it to you." The humanoid water creature waved a hand, and the blue ball of light floated toward Enlin. Enlin accepted the blue ball of light with a dumbfounded expression. His mouth moved as an absurd thought rose up in his mind. He could not help but ask, "The Starfire battleship?" The humanoid water creature nodded with a smile and said, "That's right, it's a pretty good toy. I hope you like it." Speaking of which, it was strange. He clearly couldn't see the other party's face. However, Unlin felt like the water person was smiling, and it was a very bright and friendly smile. This toy is all right. Unlin nodded before quickly getting into character and stowing the ball of light into his storage ring with a nonchalant expression. Holy F***CK. This was a strategic weapon comparable to a Dao integration stage super mighty figure. This humanoid water creature was describing it as a toy. Did it have to be so provocative? Even though he was extremely astonished, his expression was as calm as an old dog's. A smile appeared on his face. I have to do what I have to do now. Bye. He didn't know what the humanoid water creature had misunderstood, but all he had to do now was play along. The humanoid water creature stepped aside to create a path for them. Go. This world will be a better place. Unlin's lips twitched, and he held on to Lan Xiaoni's little hand as he plunged into the blue hole between the two realms within the secret stone chamber of the fallen god seabed tomb. The statue of the giant tortoise and the merman sat opposite each other, panting heavily, as if they had just completed an extremely strenuous exercise. Both of them were a bit limp. They were none other than the former high priests of the Heavenly Turtle Tribe and the Spirit Fish Clan, Tianqinji and Shihaizi. In front of them, there was a white humanoid creature that was emitting powerful energy fluctuations. A return to Void stage clone is finally complete. Shihaizi smiled. A content smile appeared on Tianqinji's face. This is the result of our combined efforts. A concerned expression appeared on Shihaizi's face. That human by the name of Unlin is more powerful than even the average return to Void stage mighty figure. Is it really going to be okay to let him in? Tianqinji chuckled coldly. Don't worry, it won't be a problem. It's already been over a dozen days, and they've already become a pile of dirt. The white humanoids' only mission is to retrieve their treasures. There are treasures from our tomb in their storage rings, so we definitely can't lose them. Shihaizi nodded. This batch of fated people was too naughty, so it was fine if they died. They could continue to give out keys, but the next batch of fated people couldn't just leave without any treasures, right? They had to continue to pick out fated people, and they couldn't afford to give out gifts. This was the reason why he and Tianqinji had chosen to create humans. We actually don't have much authority over that place, and you can't see what's going on inside, so you can only give orders to the Star Dancer. What if Unlin isn't dead? Shihaizi was still a little concerned. There's no way they won't discover the Starfire battleship once they get there. Once they discover the Starfire battleship, they'll definitely engage in battle with the Star Dancer. Do you think the Star Dancer and the Starfire battleship won't be able to kill Unlin? Tianqinji was clearly very confident in her ability to do so. Shihaizi thought about it for a moment before realizing that she was right. I'm overthinking things. Let's let the white humanoid collect the treasures now. Tianqinji nodded and was just about to open up the spatial passageway between the two worlds. All of a sudden, a blue hole appeared within the chamber. Tianqinji and Shihaizi were both given a fright upon seeing this. Shihaizi's eyes widened. This is a spatial passageway between the two worlds? Tianqinji took a deep breath. This aura. There's no mistaking it. This is a spatial passageway that connects to that world. Aside from me having the authority to open this passage, there's only one other possibility. The god inside opened it of its own accord. Both Tianqinji and Shihaizi's expressions became extremely grave as they spoke. Could it be that it wants to come out? Shihaizi was a little fearful. That's impossible. It can't come out yet. Tianqinji shook her head in denial. She then suddenly thought of a possibility, and a smile appeared on her face. Could it be that it took the initiative to deliver Unlin's storage ring to us? This was actually quite a reasonable speculation. After all, their interests were intertwined, so it was only natural for it to assist them. It couldn't come to this world, but it could toss its storage ring into this world. Thus, Tianqinji and Shihaizi both turned toward the hole. Immediately afterward, The two high priests' eyes widened in shock as they stared at the hole with incredulity on their faces. A voice sounded from within the spatial passageway. You've guessed wrongly. Not only did it take the initiative to deliver your storage ring, but it also delivered your daddy and back to you. Chapter 1071. Within the blue spatial passageway, Unlin and Lan Xiaoni had returned, and the two high priestesses were instantly intimidated by their domineering auras. This wasn't because they were all that bad *SS. It was just that it was simply too incredible for something like this to happen at a time like this. Shihaizi and Tianqinji didn't even respond to Enlin's provocation. Instead, they were still staring at Enlin and Lan Xiaoni with astonishment on their faces, as if they had become stone statues again. After the two of them emerged from the spatial passageway, the blue spatial passageway began to disappear. This proved that they really had been sent back by that being. Tianqinji craned her neck as she murmured to herself, "How could this be? The star dancer didn't stop you? I didn't acknowledge you, so how did you receive that being's approval? And it even personally sent you back?" She had too many questions in her mind, and her thoughts were in complete disarray. However, only an idiot would pay attention to this turtle's words. After Tianqinji finished speaking, she was greeted by the sight of two fleeing figures. "Don't run!" Tianqinji let loose an enraged roar as she unleashed a spatial seal. However, Enlin was already prepared, and his origin energy of the netherworld surged explosively as his realm-piercing nail transformed into a streak of red light, which pierced through Tianqinji's spatial seal. Enlin had only just broken through the spatial seal when a powerful white figure pounced toward him. "Ring! Ring!" The pristine white human pounced with a greedy expression, and his hands were like bolts of white lightning as he grabbed toward the storage ring in Enlin's hand. Enlin's expression froze. How the F***ck could he tolerate an enemy who was trying to steal his financial report? F***ck off. He let loose an enraged roar as he unleashed his Earth Lotus Supreme skill in his origin energy of the netherworld form, upon which he launched a mountain-quaking fist toward the white human's head. Bam! The terrifying power behind the fist shattered the space around the white human's head, which he didn't have time to evade, and his head was instantly pulverized. Blood exploded, and the white human's vitality was also severed in that instant. "My bye-bye. Be ***starred. Tianqinji screamed at the top of her lungs, and her eyes burned with uncontrollable fury. The white man was the fruit of her and Shihaizi's laborious efforts over a dozen days. However, it had only been alive for 2 hours before it was crushed by Enlin. This was an extremely heavy blow to her. "All of you, stay here." Shihaizi stepped forward, and his power of the divine Tao transformed into a massive wave that was capable of engulfing and destroying all things before sweeping toward Enlin and Lan Xiaoni at an extremely fast speed. The massive wave of the divine Tao was imbued with the power of frost and water, and it was powerful enough to engulf any return to void stage mighty figure. The huge wave was surging, much faster than their escape speed. Moreover, it sealed off all the space to escape. It was like a huge palm that reached the heavens, about to mercilessly slap down. "I can't escape." Enlin's expression changed, and he prepared to fight to the death. Right at this moment, a blue shadow rushed in front of him. When Enlin saw this, he shouted, "Little brother Lan, have you gone insane? Get back here." Lan Xiaoni extended a slender arm toward the massive wave of the divine Tao, and she spoke in a soft voice that was imbued with a hint of divine nature. "Stop!" The massive wave of the divine Tao that was sweeping toward them with unstoppable force suddenly froze on the spot like a painting scroll, as if it had received some sort of supreme command. Enlin's mouth gaped open in shock upon seeing this. Shihaizi and Tianqinji were even more astonished. At this moment, a blue water droplet appeared on Lan Xiaoni's forehead, and a paramount divine might erupted from her body, making her appear as if she were a goddess looking down upon the ants of this world. Divine break. Lan Xiaoni thrust her palm forward. Boom! The massive wave of the divine Tao roared with rage in that instant before changing directions and crashing toward Shi Haizi and Tianqinji. Holy F***ck. This. Shi Haizi was dumbstruck, and he forgot to do anything. This power was too F***king familiar. He recalled back to the horror of being dominated by the ancient heavenly fiend celestial. Tianqinji hurriedly constructed a starlight barrier, but that barrier was no match for Shi Haizi's massive wave of divine Tao. A crisp explosion erupted, and the divine Tao wave engulfed Shi Haizi and Tianqinji. The cavernous room was instantly transformed into a vast ocean. Massive waves surged as destructive power surged through the air, killing all living beings within it. Lan Xiaoni slowly withdrew her palm, and her hair danced in the wind. In Enlin's eyes, her petite, snowy white back had become extremely reliable. Enlin was a little dazed. Underling Lan, who would usually hide behind him with a cowardly expression, was now standing in front of him and repelling the two high priestesses, thereby becoming his backer. This. Are you F***king hacking? Enlin couldn't help but exclaim in shock. Lan Xiaoni turned her head to the side. The blue water droplets were still exuding a divine glow, making her features appear even more holy and beautiful. She glared at Enlin and snapped, "It wasn't easy for me to become so powerful, can't you say something nice?" Enlin faltered slightly before giving her a thumbs up. Underling Lan is the best. Lan Xiaoni. Lan Xiaoni was hoping that Enlin would say something along the lines of, "Little and I didn't think that you would become my backer," but it looked like she was overthinking things. Enlin was quite innocent. He had always been the one flexing, and it had been a long time since he had complimented someone. He really didn't know what the correct way to compliment someone was. Water splashed violently. Shi Haizi roared with rage as he jumped out. Lan Xiaoni's expression shifted, and she dragged Enlin along as she fled toward the door of the room. "What are you waiting for? Run!" Enlin was perplexed. "You're already so bad *SS, why are we still running?" Lan Xiaoni transmitted her voice to Enlin secretly. "I've obtained some kind of divine power that allows me to control all water-type spell techniques. However, I won't be able to defend against other types of spells." Enlin came to a sudden realization upon hearing this. So that was the case. But this type of power, why did it sound so familiar? Suddenly, he thought of his lightning manipulation technique. Enlin turned to her with a serious expression. "Underling Lan, you're not using any hacks. Tell me the truth, did you obtain some kind of system?" Lan Xiaoni was dumbstruck. "What?" Enlin. All right, it looked like he had misunderstood. He couldn't help but think of the ancient heavenly fiend celestial again. In the diary, the star dancer had described the ancient heavenly fiend celestial as the true ruler of the ocean and that it could use any water-type spell technique for its own use. As for Lan Xiaoni, Enlin fell into deep thought. He had to ponder over the mysterious being's words. The two of them began to rush into the passageway toward the exit of the tomb. Behind them, the two high priests were still chasing after them. However, Shi Haizi suddenly grabbed Tianqinji's arm halfway through. "What is it? If we don't give chase now, they're going to get away." Tianqinji was perplexed. Shi Haizi took a deep breath. "I think we made a mistake." Chapter 1072. Tianqinji was perplexed. What did we do wrong? Shi Haizi looked on at the passageway that Enlin and Lan Xiaoni had escaped through. "Back then, we made a divination and discovered that a new star would appear in the future. She would inherit everything we have here and carry out that mission. Then, she would lead our two tribes into a new era. Why can't this new star be her?" A smile suddenly appeared on Shi Haizi's face. "Her?" Tianqinji was a little angry. "She's disrespectful to our ancestors and doesn't abide by the rules of the tomb. How could she be the mermaid who carries the heavy responsibility of our two tribes?" Shi Haizi was not enraged. Instead, a carefree smile appeared on his face. It's exactly because she doesn't abide by the rules that she's the fated one that we need. Only a mermaid like her can lead our two tribes into a new era. If she didn't abide by the rules, she wouldn't even be able to obtain the secrets of our two tribes, right? Tianqinji fell silent. Shihaizi continued. As a result, not only did she and that man obtain the ancient tomb's treasures, but they also obtained the secrets of the two tribes. She even obtained the power of that god. Isn't that enough to prove that she's the new star we're looking for? So be it. Perhaps you're right. The flowers turn green when spring arrives, the leaves fall when autumn arrives, the boundless Prajna heart is at ease, the body moves in silence. Everything in this world is a result of fate. I acknowledge them. Tianqinji thought back to the image that Shihaizi had shown her, and she finally heaved a forlorn sigh before nodding in agreement. In that image there was a hideous mermaid riddled with wounds. She gripped her divine Tao spear tightly, and there was an unyielding determination in her eyes. It was very difficult to imagine that a frail and cowardly mermaid princess would have this kind of expression in her eyes. Haizi, then our inheritances, give them everything. Alright, which one will you choose? I choose that adorable mermaid princess. Seeing as she already has the power of a god, she should be able to completely inherit my spirit fish water-type inheritance. Do I have to give my inheritance to that human? With my current power? He's lucky. Tianqinji's voice became softer and softer, and her body started to petrify. A white orb of light flew toward the tunnel at a terrifying speed. Shihaizi sat on the huge stone turtle, and his vitality had been severed. A blue ball of light appeared and chased after the white ball of light toward the passageway at an extremely fast speed. At the same time, Unlin and Lan Xiaoni were still fleeing from their pursuers. They had already arrived at the three-way junction and were still a short distance away from escaping from the tomb. Suddenly, Unlin seemed to have sensed something. He turned around and his expression changed greatly. Watch out! The white ball of light rushed toward him at an extremely fast speed. In the nick of time, he took out the chaotic alloy brick without hesitation and placed it in front of him. The black brick was said to be indestructible and indestructible. As a result, the white ball of light collided with the black brick and was heavily injured. Tianqinji. Lan Xiaoni screamed at the sight of the blue ball of light hurtling toward her. Her divine might instantly erupted forth as she swatted a palm toward the blue ball of light. She could control all water-type spells, including water-type inherited spells. Therefore, Pa Ji. The blue ball of light was slapped away, and it was also heavily injured. Shihaizi. The two of them began to doubt their own judgment for the first time. Their inherited spell techniques had an extremely high accuracy rate, but they were blocked at the same time. How the F***ck could they be considered fated people? The white ball of light shuddered violently before flying in a 180-degree arc toward Unlin's back. Unlin's expression shifted drastically, and he tried to change the direction of the black brick. However, the white ball of light was simply too fast, and it instantly fused into his back without any hesitation. Boom! A vast amount of information and spell technique true intent exploded in his mind. Shihaizi's eyes lit up slightly upon seeing what the white ball of light was doing, and he tried to emulate it by flying in a wide arc toward Lan Xiaoni's back. And then, he was astonished to discover that he was unable to move. That's right, he had been controlled by Lan Xiaoni, and had become Lan Xiaoni's spell technique. Shihaizi. He was clearly trying to bestow all of his inheritances upon them, only to find that his inheritances had been blocked, slapped away, and controlled. What kind of tragedy was this? Fated people my A**s. Shihaizi was definitely not going to admit to this. He was going to leave. Unfortunately, he was unable to move. Unlin suddenly moaned. Phew. Big Boss Unlin, are you alright? Lan Xiaoni turned to Unlin with a concerned expression. I'm fine. That ball of light seems to be harmless. I received Tianqingji's inheritance. Anlin hesitated momentarily before replying with a peculiar expression. Lan Xiaoni's mouth gaped open in disbelief. Senior Tianqingji's inheritance? They were hunting us down just a second ago, and now they're suddenly giving us inheritances? Have they gone insane? Anlin nodded. They're probably insane. I knew they were temperamental and unreasonable a long time ago, but it looks like they really are crazy. The blue ball of light flared up with rage. Crazy my *s. You're badmouthing me like this, and I'm going to give you my inheritance? Dream on. He was enraged. But he still couldn't move. You received Senior Tianqingji's inheritance, so this should be Senior Shihaizi's inheritance? That should be the case. It would be a waste not to accept it. All right, I'm looking forward to it. Thus, the blue ball of light fell under Lan Xiaoni's control with a despairing expression, and it crashed into Lan Xiaoni's body. After a while, Lan Xiaoni opened her bright eyes. Big Boss Anlin turned to the beautiful mermaid beside him. What is it? Senior Shihaizi is so generous! Lan Xiaoni exclaimed in amazement. Anlin, Senior Shihaizi will definitely be very happy to see you so happy, Anlin said with a smile. Lan Xiaoni and Anlin both extended an earnest bow toward the tomb to express their gratitude. In any case, they were very grateful to receive the acknowledgement of the two high priestesses. After doing all that, they continued onward. They passed through the spatial gate at the end of the passageway and finally exited the tomb and returned to the depths of the West Sea. Haha, I'm finally out! Lan Xiaoni yelled with elation as she swam through the water with her long, slender tail. Anlin also heaved a long sigh of relief, and his entire body felt very relaxed. After going through so many battles and encountering so many perilous situations, they were finally back. Even though this trip to the tomb was extremely perilous, they had also reaped many rewards, so Anlin was very satisfied. Everything that I've been through feels like a dream. Lan Xiaoni sighed with emotion as she spread open her arms and closed her eyes to breathe, as if she were embracing the entire ocean. Anlin smiled. Let's go up. It's time to unlock the secrets on the turtle shell. All right. Lan Xiaoni replied obediently before swimming toward the surface of the West Sea with Anlin. Chapter 1073. Within a certain mysterious region of the West Sea on the Taichu continent, close to 20 days had passed since Anlin and Lan Xiaoni had entered the tomb. High Priest Gu Yu of the Heavenly Turtle Tribe was lying on the surface of the water in a leisurely manner, waiting for the results. High Priest Yu Feiyu of the Spirit Fish clan raised his palms to the sky, and a vibrant smile appeared on his face as the colorful ball of water in his hands trembled. The exit of the tomb has been opened, and they're coming back. That's faster than I expected. Gu Yu also smiled. Both of the high priests were elated. The fact that the tomb had been opened meant that they had returned safely. As such, it was very likely that they would be able to obtain information that concerned the fate and future of their two tribes. This was fantastic news for both of their tribes. Space split open, and 3 powerful Spirit Fish clan living beings emerged from within. The blue-haired, golden-eyed man at the front of the group burst into hearty laughter. Ha ha! I just performed a divination, and today is the day my daughter returns home. How could I miss an occasion like this? This was none other than the leader of the Spirit Fish clan, a Dao integration stage super mighty figure, Lan Xingyang. A yellow-haired young man rolled his eyes. Dad, why do you need to perform a divination for something like this? You only found out about this because the power of the tomb and the Hong Meng sacrificial altar is no longer being maintained. Lan Xingyang unnoticeably glared at the yellow-haired young man who liked to undermine him. At this moment, a handsome Spirit Fish clan man spoke with a smile. I'm sure our little sister is going to bring us some surprises after her safe return. Gu Yu laughed heartily upon hearing this. Are you kidding me? That mermaid princess who was scared to tears at the sight of Anlin is going to bring you surprises? Bring back a brick or 2 from the tomb. Ha ha. The Spirit Fish clan had already learned of Enlin's identity through some means. As such, Guyu couldn't be bothered to hide Enlin's identity, so he just referred to him by his name. Lan Xingyang and the other living beings should be aware of the massive power gap between Enlin and Lan Xiaoni even without Guyu's reminder. Yet, they were still holding out hope for Lan Xiaoni? The yellow-haired mermaid nodded in agreement. I think Senior Guyu is right. With Big Sister's powers, it's already a miracle that she didn't die in the tomb, yet you're still thinking that there's going to be a pleasant surprise? What are you thinking? The handsome merman chuckled. Because my father said so, and so did High Priest Yu Feiyu. I deduced it based on their words. Why? Is there a problem? The yellow-haired merman. Brother, do you have some kind of misunderstanding about the concept of deduction? Meanwhile, Lan Xingyang smiled and said, Lan Xiaowang, your brother is right. This is called a double similarity deduction, and it's deducing based on what we've said. It's very high-end. Asterisk kiss. Asterisk everyone sucked in a breath of cold air, not knowing what was going on. Tina and the jade bone immortal bug stared at the family before them with astonishment etched on their faces. Are they really the best in astrology? Why did he look like a fraud? At this moment Yu Feiyu couldn't help but say, Guyu, you're too short-sighted. Your current strength isn't a reflection of your future strength. Lan Xiaoni possesses the great fortune of the Spirit Fish clan, so how can a human from another tribe compare? Guyu shook his head with a calm expression. How would you know what I saw? No matter who it is, as long as they can lead the Heavenly Turtle tribe out of this perilous situation and into a new era, then our tribe will support them. Both sides expressed their stances, and it was quite clear that they were on opposing sides. At this moment, a burst of water erupted. The main characters that both sides were looking forward to finally appeared. A smile appeared on Lan Xingyang's face. Xiaoni, you're finally back. Are you all right? The smile on his face widened at the sight of Lan Xiaoni. Giant and Lin. Master. The two beast pets also flew toward the man. Mr. Enlin, how was your trip? Guyu asked with a smile. Haha, it was quite a fruitful trip. A smug smile appeared on Enlin's face. Guyu and the others were ecstatic to hear this. Meanwhile, High Priest Yu Feiyu turned to Lan Xiaoni with a nervous expression. I'm fine, father. I also reaped some rewards. A sweet smile appeared on Lan Xiaoni's face. Lan Xingyang was ecstatic to hear this. What kind of rewards? Were they treasures left behind by the two high priests, or some important information regarding the two tribes? The treasures and information are all in Big Boss and Lin's hands, Lan Xiaoni replied with an awkward smile. Lan Xingyang's lips twitched upon hearing this. What the F***ck? The treasures and information were all in Enlin's hands. How could this be considered a reward? However, Lan Xiaoni suddenly realized something. Wait, Big Sister, you just said Big Boss Enlin, did I hear you correctly? Everyone suddenly came to a realization as they turned to Lan Xiaoni with astonishment on their faces. A bright blush appeared on Lan Xiaoni's face, and she stuttered as she explained, Big Boss Enlin took special care of me in the tomb, so that's why I called him that. Enlin nodded in acknowledgement. That's right. Let me introduce Lan Xiaoni to everyone. She is my new underling. Yu Feiyu's rainbow water ball almost fell into the ocean upon hearing this. Lan Xingyang drew a sharp intake of breath. Guyu abruptly slapped his own head. Is there something wrong with this development? I clearly divined that Lan Xiaoni was Enlin's most powerful enemy. Have I gone senile with age? Everyone was astonished, as well as High Priest Guyu, who had fallen into self-doubt. However, Tina and the jade bone immortal bug didn't find this strange. After all, Enlin's habit of accepting underlings was still there. This was a completely normal occurrence. Master, our big family has a new member. Giant and Lin, which team does Big Sister Mermaid belong to? A servant, a beast pet, or a disciple? She doesn't belong to any of those teams. I didn't sign a contract with her, so it's just a verbal promise. And Lin explained. Lan Xiaoni took a glance at An Lin before turning to Lan Xingyang with a hint of unease on her face. Lan Xingyang took a deep breath and finally came back to his senses. He reluctantly accepted that he had turned an enemy into a friend. His daughter had become the underling of the man who had indirectly killed her fiancé. As long as his daughter didn't mind, he couldn't be bothered to say anything. As for how the Black Fox tribe would feel, they were chess pieces that he was planning to discard after using anyway, so he didn't care at all. Lan Xingyang opened his mouth before asking, "Didn't you say that he took a lot of care of you? Why are all the treasures and information with him? Big Boss and Lin kept me safe." A sweet smile appeared on Lan Xiaoni's face. Lan Xingyang, big brother and little brother. Speaking of which, the tomb would still attack him if you died. That didn't mean anything. Countless stars flashed through Yu Feiyu's eyes as she silently scanned Lan Xiaoni's entire body. That's strange. She didn't fall under any hypnotic spell techniques.